The world around us is full of wonders. To those with eyes willing to see, the beauty of nature is everywhere, an endless well of fascination. Some of nature's most glorious, most entrancing creations are the monsters. Megafauna that come in all shapes and sizes, creatures of awe and power that rule the wild lands. Their bodies, their abilities, their behaviors, all unique, all mesmerizing. It is the Hunters Guild's sworn mission to record, study, and preserve these amazing creatures, both for their sake and to protect humanity in its encounters with the wild. In this special film, commissioned by the Scrivener's Lodge of Dandorma, we will explore the ecology of a wide variety of these monsters, focusing on creatures that were discovered during the Guild's first generation of research. Of all the creatures that roam the land, few are as feared as the flying wyvern. As the single most diverse class of monsters, these winged bipedal wyvern come in many shapes and sizes, most of them quite fearsome. But even among this highly successful class, one genus stands above all, a group of flying wyvern so dominant and ecologically thriving that they have become synonymous with the entire class of flying wyvern. Indeed, no matter where one walks, it is likely to be the territory of a wrath. Like all flying wyvern, wraths are easily distinguished by their grounded hind limbs and winged front limbs. Their legs are thick and strong, with wide four-toed feet. Their wings extend outwards and have thick membranes adorned with distinct swirly patterns. Their bodies, their triangular heads, and their long clubbed tails are all covered in an assortment of shells and scales, for which they are classified under the infraorder Testa Dracone, shell wyvern. This coat of armor is unique among flying wyverns due to its density. The smallest scales on a wrath are essentially flush with the creature's skin, meaning that they overlap and bend seamlessly and without friction. This allows the wraths to have outstanding protection against physical damage while not sacrificing virtually any mobility. With such protection and the ability to take to the air, one might think that the wraths are in need of protection, opportunists ready to flee at any moment. Nothing could be further from the truth. The wraths sit at the top of almost any ecosystem they inhabit, due to three key factors. One is their high mobility and durable shell armor. Another one is their arsenal of offensive options. All wrath species grow both a flame sac and a venom gland in their bodies. The flame sac produces a fiery blend of particles and viscous fluid that can be spit from the mouth as streams or projectiles of scorching flames. The venom gland, meanwhile, produces a dangerous venomous compound that weakens and kills anything it is injected into, making for a formidable tool in subduing prey. The wraths themselves are immune to this poison. The third and most influential factor to the wrath's success is their extreme sexual dimorphism and resulting co-parenting strategies. Sexual dimorphism refers to the phenomenon in which individuals of the same species show anatomical differences between sexes. In the Rath's case, the male Rathalos and the female Rathian look so dissimilar that a novice hunter would be excused for thinking that they are entirely different creatures. The female Rathian is a common sight in forests and temperate hill regions, although some are known to live in desert zones as well. In the most common species of Raths, Rath regalis, also known as the regal Rath, the Rathian has a distinct green shell armor, allowing it to blend in seamlessly among the trees. Despite the species' overall reputation, a female Rath is actually much more adapted to life on land. Its wings are strong, but not remarkable beyond that. Its hind legs, meanwhile, are extremely muscular, allowing it a secure bipedal stance when grounded. Its talons are shorter than those of the males, presumably to maximize land mobility. These two features allow the Rathian to downright gallop across the ground, running and charging at foes in a brutal manner. The reason for these adaptations is the Rathian's parental role. Once a mother, the Rathian is tasked with procuring prey and offering protection from the ground. This is likely a result of the phenomenon in which encountering small prey in dense forests is easier on land than from the air. The other main feature of the Rathian's body is perhaps the most apparent one. All across her body, but especially on the back, shoulders, and the tail tip, the female Rath grows assortments of rigid, dark green barbs. These structures are directly connected to the Rath's venom gland, which in the females is located in the tail. These barbs are used to inject the deadly Rath poison into prey and enemy alike, mostly through the Rath swinging its tail at adversaries. The location of these barbs and the venom gland are also a result of the Rathian's grounded lifestyle. Swinging a tail at an enemy is easier when on the ground, especially if one can backflip with as much ease as the Rathian can. And the barbs on the back and shoulders protect the female from attacks from above, ensuring that any rivaling flying wyvern would immediately get poisoned should it push its luck. Notably, the long spike on the chin of the Rathian is not a venom barb per se. It is instead a hollow feeding tube, through which the Rathian can push pre-chewed food out as small squishy pellets for her young to enjoy. A little bit of poison is still mixed in with that food, however, in order to immunize the young to Rath poison, such that they can in the future poison their prey without worry. The male Rathalos, meanwhile, has a few notable differences in its anatomy. The coloration of a Rathalos is always, in all known Rath species, distinctly unlike that of the Rathian. A regal Rathalos is generally red, with dark accents across its shell armor. While the Rathian's parental role confines it mostly to the ground, the male Rathalos is tasked with protecting the territory from above. A true king of the sky, with an anatomy that fully embraces and facilitates an airborne lifestyle. For one, it entirely lacks the venom barbs that so starkly define the Rathian. Tissue analysis has revealed that the males do actually have the capacity to grow these barbs, but that they have degenerated severely over time. Most scholars interpret this to be a result of the Rathalos' airborne nature, as losing the barbs makes the body more aerodynamic, reducing friction and allowing for more agile maneuvers in the air. And truly, a flighted Rathalos has few equals. Its lack of barbs, slimmed down shell, and extremely powerful wings make it a magnificent flyer. Its preferred method of attack is to descend onto prey with its powerful talons. Its feet are modified to accommodate this, as its toes are much longer and more articulate than those of the females, allowing for rapid, solid slashes and a strong grip on prey. These elongated toes can, however, be awkward to walk on when the Rathalos lands. To mitigate this, the males have specialized toe joints that allow them to curl their talons and shorten them, making for a more comfortable grounded gait. It is a crude workaround, but while it does not afford the Rathalos the ground mobility of its female counterpart, it does its job sufficiently well. Its venom gland is also altered to suit the male's needs. In Rathalos, it is located in the feet, supplying venom exclusively to the sharp claws at the toes. All of these adaptations make the Rathalos a devastating force of nature when in the air. And yet, it is not a creature designed merely for violence. Just like the Rathian, the Rathalos has a parental structure on its chin, a small osteoderm, visually comparable to a short horn or spike. Its purpose, however, is not to pierce enemies, but to dig up soil and arrange loose organic matter. It is a tool for building nests. With these adaptations, as well as a fiery breath that both sexes share, both Wraths would be powerhouses in their own right. But they exist as pairs, and as such are nearly unstoppable no matter the ecosystem. For the first years of their life, Wraths live apart. The male Rathalos wander harsh environments, such as mountain regions and volcanic plains, where they prey on strong competitors to hone their skills. Meanwhile, Rathians tend to congregate in milder climates, green havens where they grow up in relative peace. One well-known spot that usually attracts unpaired Rathians are the forests in the center of the continent, near Dandorma. During the breeding season, Rathians migrate towards the Rathalos in search of a suitable mate. Hormonal flushes subtly change both monsters. The barbs of the Rathian grow thicker, while the chin spike of the Rathalos grows longer. Both of these features are believed to be relevant for mate selection. Once a suitable pair has found each other and the deed has been done, a peculiar thing happens. Some pairs immediately split up, with the Rathalos returning to harsher regions while the now gravid Rathian does not return to the green hills of her homeland, but instead migrates to hotter climates, often deserts. These lone Rathian then raise their young on their own, becoming aggressive and fierce single mothers. But just as often, the pairs don't split up after mating. It is unknown what determines this outcome. Instead, many Wrath pairs remain bonded for the rest of their lives, as the Rathalos accompanies its gravid mate back to her forested home, where a sophisticated co-parenting strategy begins. As the female prepares for the arduous task of egg-laying, the male scouts out a suitable nest location, usually either in caves with an open roof for aerial access or on the side of cliffs and mountains. The Rathalos then begins preparing the nest, arranging dead plant and other organic matter into a dense bed. This matter will, over time, decompose into an oily, flammable liquid that can be ignited to scare off smaller creatures. Once the nest is ready, the Rathian will lay a clutch of around 10 eggs, which will hatch soon after. Once the children arrive, the true labor begins. The parents divide their duties based on their innate abilities. The Rathian prowls the land, looking for small prey to present to the young, while also marking the territory with claw marks. The Rathalos, meanwhile, oversees that territory from the air, fighting off any other flying wyvern that attempt to fly through their airspace, as well as scouting for land threats from above. These duties are performed in shifts to ensure that one parent is always within earshot of the nest. Juvenile Wraths are completely defenseless, after all. Both parents excel at their roles. A fully grown Rathalos isn't just an excellent flyer, but also possesses a lot of stamina. While most flying wyvern can only fly for a few hours at a time due to their size, a Rathalos can easily stay in the air for 3 days in a row. Using this ability, the father becomes a continuous watchful eye in the sky. But it is the Rathian that truly shines during this time, as she displays significant intelligence and cunning. Notably, a Rathian will not merely attack every creature that enters her territory. Instead, she will cultivate a mini ecosystem to maximize the protection of her nest. For example, Rathian are known to allow smaller carnivores to nest in their territories, because said carnivores usually prey on smaller ovivores, the detestable egg eaters that are the Rathian's main concern. Thus, by selectively allowing the presence of certain species while rejecting others, the queen curates the local food chain, with herself and her mate on top. The Rathian is also primarily in charge of nurturing and educating her clutch. The oily puddles near the nest are an excellent way for the juvenile Raths to learn how to use their flame breath, for example. Numerous hunters and scholars have also reported seeing Rathian kidnap smaller wyvern, such as young velociprey, alive, in order to present them to their young, presumably to train them in combat against a weak opponent. These strategies, which make excellent use of the unique strengths of each parent, have caused the child mortality of Raths to be shockingly low for wild wyvern standards. This leads to steady population growth and proliferation, which has resulted in the regal Raths specifically being perhaps the single most successful species of wyvern ever observed. Rath regalis is found all across the old continent and even on the New World, a true testament to the species' extraordinarily effective lifestyle. With such a wide geographic distribution also comes regional variation, as different habitats promote and encourage subtle differences even within the same species. In the case of Rath regalis, two distinct trends of regional variation other than the regular Schradian Dundorman kind are known. The further east one goes on the main continent, the bulkier and thicker the regal Raths get. These are known as Eastern Regal Raths, and they display a significantly enhanced musculature. This regional variation seems to have originated in the island district, likely due to increased competition and harsh island terrain necessitating additional muscle mass. Notably, Eastern Rathians are a lot more prone to flight than their Schradian sisters, even attacking from the air like their mates on rare occasions. The more drastic regional variation, however, is seen in the opposite direction, the New World. Being an entirely separate continent, the New World has caused many of the local species, many of which also exist in the Old World, to evolve differently to their Old World counterparts. The Raths are no exception, as the New World variation seems to have branched off from the Old World lineage fairly early, as they display some significant anatomical differences. This is especially visible in the males. New World Rathalos have an additional finger bone fused into the wing, and their legs are almost twice as thick as those of the Schradian or Eastern variations. This is believed to be a result of the Rath's main habitat on the New World, the ancient forest, whose trees and greenery are much thicker and harder to navigate than the mild woodlets of the Old World. The additional bone in the wing allows for more sophisticated folding of the wings, making precise navigation in the dense forest easier. Likewise, the thicker legs and increased muscle mass allowed the New World Rathalos to take off without much preparation or momentum, an invaluable ability in an area with little open space. New World Rathians, meanwhile, don't have many visible differences, but instead one massive, invisible one: the venom gland's location. In Old World Rathians, the gland is believed to be located at the base of the tail. This is due to the observation that cutting off the tail of an Old World Rathian does not fully disable her ability to produce venom, meaning that the gland has to be located rather close to the body. In New World Rathians, however, losing her tail does in fact rob the Rathian of her venom entirely, thus leading researchers to conclude that their venom gland sits at the tip. This might be an adaptation designed to concentrate the venom more directly into the tail barbs, the main weapon, at the cost of increased risk of losing it. A massive difference between Old World and New World Wraths is also found in their cooperative behaviors. While Wraths in the Old World would either pair up for life or split instantly after procreation, New World Wraths perform a kind of competitive polygamy. During the breeding season, countless Rathians seek out one Rathalos in the ancient forest. The male then mates with as many females as he can muster. Once this is done, only one Rathian, the most dominant, assertive, suitable female, is allowed to remain in the forest while the others are cast out. The dominant female then lives out her days much like the Old World species would, caring for her young in cooperation with their father in the ancient forest. The rejected Rathians, however, are forced to move into the adjacent desert region, the Wildspire Waste, where they have to raise their children all by themselves. No Rathalos will ever come to help them, and these females are notably more aggressive and violent than the ones who are chosen as queen. While the Regal Wraths are by far the most widespread Wrath species out there, it is certainly not the only one. Disregarding regional variation, there are so far 3 distinct species within the genus Wrath. Wrath regalis is just often considered the common species, due to its abundance. The second most proliferate species is known as Wrath ornatus, the ornate Wrath. This Wrath species is distinguished by their coloration, wherein the males are blue, called Azure Rathalos, and the females are pink, called Pink Rathian. This species is believed to have developed out of a mutation to the shell of Regal Wraths. At some point, a mutation began appearing in the gene pool that caused the composition of the shell armor on Wraths to change drastically, becoming much thicker, denser, and heavier while also distorting pigmentation. This mutation was, at least initially, very likely a death sentence. These mutated Wraths were too heavy to move effectively, and too colorful to hide when necessary. The blue males likely suffered under the weight of the shell, making them unable to fly, while the pink females were easy to spot in the forests. But over time, as nature tends to do, these mutated Wraths adapted to their bodies. The Azure Rathalos eventually began developing additional muscle mass to enable life with the reinforced shell. In the process, their muscles grew so strong that they became even more adept flyers than the Red Brothers, with unmatched aerial precision and prowess. The Pink Rathian also adapted to her new armor, likewise developing increased muscle mass, but to a lesser degree. While a Pink Rathian can fly fairly well due to her enhanced strength, she actually doesn't need to. The additional weight of the mutated shell makes her charging rampages and trample stampedes even more deadly. Her venomous tail is also a lot heavier than in Green Rathians, making it an even more powerful bludgeoning weapon. Additionally, Pink Rathians have increased aggression in order to counter the conflicts that they're likely to encounter due to their coloration. Once adapted to it, these mutated Wraths were significantly more dangerous than their regular cousins, as they now boasted both a more resistant protective shell as well as enhanced strength. As these mutations stabilized and became consistent across generations, and as the affected wraths grew to overcome them, they eventually speciated, becoming a genetically distinct and consistent subspecies of the wrath genus, Wrath ornatus. They are considered the most aggressive species of wrath, likely a psychological consequence of the hardships these wraths usually face in their youth. The rarest species of wrath is, by comparison, so rare that every few years, some researcher or another proposes that it actually doesn't even exist, that it was just a handful of discolored individuals reported by questionable sources. That is, however, untrue, as the existence of the third wrath species, Wrath metalis, has been confirmed by numerous accredited scholars and hunters over the years. The so-called metal wraths are so elusive that they have been designated with the rare species classification by the Hunters Guild, reserved for the rarest and most powerful non-Elder Dragon monsters. Metal wraths are so rarely seen because they only inhabit the least hospitable environments on the planet: smoldering volcanic mountain ranges and desolate, ruined plains. They are slightly more abundant on the continent of Funron compared to the Central Continent and the New World continent. Metal wraths are named as such because they, just like the ornate wraths, sport a discolored shell, in this case a silver shell in the males and a golden one in the females. This discoloration is likely also an adaptation that resulted from a mutation, but one that is far less understood than what happened to the ornate wraths. What is known is that through some kind of genetic change, the shell of metal wraths is able to absorb and bind metal dust from the surrounding air, fusing it into the armor and reinforcing and discoloring the shell in the process. This process is very similar to how the plate armor of a Lao Shan Lung forms, and just like with that dragon, the shell of the metal wraths is unfathomably hard and resistant due to this. Whether or not this happened because a population of wraths moved into volcanic regions with aerosol metal dust, or if it was this mutation that caused the wraths to migrate to said regions in the first place, is unknown. What is observable is that these enhanced metal shells offer the Silver Rathalos and Gold Rathian unparalleled protection against physical damage. It, however, introduces a new problem. A shell laced with conductive metals allows electricity to travel through easily, which meshes poorly with the wrath's natural weakness to thunder. Another key difference between Wrath metalis and the other wrath species is the functionality of the flame sac. In metal wraths, this organ has additional membrane openings that can, at the wyvern's command, start venting heat into the metal shell, spiking the wrath's body temperature and igniting the shell with a white-hot glow. In this mode, called the incandescent state by the guild, the flames produced by the metal wraths are unthinkably hot, able to melt just about anything. It is believed that venting the excess heat from the flame sac into their shell allows Wrath metalis to push the power of its flame sac to its limit without it exploding under its own pressure. This, of course, partially melts the metal shell, making it softer to damage. How exactly this feature evolved is currently unknown. It might be the result of a mutation separate from the one that metallized the shell, or it might be a consequence of the same mutation. Research is still ongoing. Due to the relative abyss of knowledge regarding them, as well as their brilliant coloration, metal wraths are worshipped as heavenly messengers by some fringe cultures. These are the three generally defined species of wrath, with very little discourse surrounding their legitimacy, except of course the occasional controversy about metal wraths. Curiously, no crossbreeding between them has ever been observed, although considering their phylogenetic relatedness, it should absolutely be possible in theory. Besides these three core species, there is one other kind of wrath that can, extraordinarily rarely, be found roaming the lands. For the Wrath regalis species, can be subject to deviance. Deviance is a catch-all term for extreme variations in individual monster physiology and behavior that are so absurdly pronounced that regular genetic and environmental factors cannot explain them away easily. It is in many ways an extreme form of variance. These individuals are then called deviants. Rathregales can produce deviance in both the males and females, although it is even rarer than encountering a metal wrath. Male deviants are called Dread King Rathalos, and are defined by a dark red carapace, enlarged talons, and a generally humongous body shape. Just about every aspect of this wyvern is enhanced. Its poison is more potent, its wings are stronger and allow for longer flight, and its shell is resistant to most attacks. Most devastating, however, is the upgrade to its flame sac. In addition to the usual fire particle blend, this organ produces a secondary substance that allows the flames to burn hotter and even expand and contract multiple times. This allows for the breathing of flames that explode violently, detonating multiple times even after hitting their target. This secondary substance also seems to leak into the wyvern's hide, as its scales and shells burn at scorching temperatures, even after being removed from the Rathalos. It's this leaking that is likely the cause of the wyvern's discoloration. The female deviant is designated with the name Dread Queen Rathian, recognizable by the enlarged poison barbs and dark purple coloration. While the male deviant has all of its physical characteristics enhanced, the Dread Queen is defined by a singular but remarkable transformation: her venom gland. The production of venom in the Dread Queen Rathian is enhanced and pushed into overdrive, to the point where her enlarged barbs are constantly leaking liquid venom and even emitting venom gas. It is this saturation that likely causes the discoloration of the shell. The barbs on the Dread Queen's tail can even break off in chunks, laying on the ground and emitting clouds of noxious gas. Even in death, the Dread Queen Rathian is deadly, as every body part is absolutely doused in venom. Only the most experienced weaponsmiths would even dare handle Dread Queen scales as a result. Like with most deviants, it is unknown what creates the Dread Wraths. A fringe faction within the scholarly halls of Dundorma has suggested that it might be a dormant gene that is passed down in certain lineages of regal wrath. This Dread gene would activate in only very few wrath embryos, but once it did, it is theorized to hypercharge hormonal activity in the body, causing the wrath to display overdevelopment of all relevant organs and body structures, from size to flame sac to venom glands. The discolorations being a consequence of overly active elemental organs somewhat supports that hypothesis, but as of right now, the guild isn't even close to accepting it as a core theory. For the moment, the mystery of the deviant wraths remains unsolved. No matter where one goes, one is likely to trespass on royal territory. For if there is one genus of monster that has truly, indubitably succeeded in nature, it is the Wrath. Coming in many colors, rarities, and tempers, these flying wyvern truly earn their titles as the rulers of sky and land, for their cunning, effective rule lives on, supremacy built on a magnificent interplay between sexual dimorphism, evolutionary creativity, and sheer, unbridled power. People often assume that the natural world has a pecking order. That, no matter the circumstances, Some creatures will always sit at the bottom of the ecological chain, destined to be bullied and humiliated by their superiors. It is a twisted view of the food chain, but a common one. For example, many civilians and even hunters assume bird wyverns, a clade of monsters entirely contained in the suborder Avepoda, are always at the bottom of any ecosystem. They are skittish, they are fragile, and they generally lack the advanced defensive abilities of true wyvern. But such an outlook is truly foolish, for many of the most inconspicuous bird wyvern live a life of objective ecological success. One must only look upon the Old World continent to see this in action. All across the land, the only true consistency is that every ecosystem has its own bespoke bird wyvern. More specifically, the Old World is thoroughly saturated by a clade of monsters called the Old World Raptors. This clade, also called Vetumundora, is a superfamily of the infraorder runner wyvern. Runner wyvern are bird wyvern defined by being wingless and bipedal, with their front limbs having articulate hands and claws to differing degrees across the families. Most of them also form packs, which is somewhat unusual for large monsters and wyverns. This group can be further split into 3 categories: the New World Raptors, the Old World Raptors, and the Dog Wyvern. The Old World Raptors comprise of 3 families, all of which are entirely exclusive to the main Old World continent. More specifically, Old World Raptors are defined by having a more slender build compared to the other families in the clade. They also form much larger packs on average, and they all grow crests and other socially relevant body structures directly on top of their heads as opposed to somewhere else on their bodies. The most prolific and well-known family of Old World Raptors is the Veloci. In many ways, they are the poster child of Vetumundora, being both abundant and fairly present even near civilized regions. Their thin bodies are covered in bright blue overlapping scales that can protect them from harm, and their long, beak-like mouths are filled with sharp teeth. At the top of their heads, the Veloci grow an orange crest that distinguishes their rank within the pack. The larger the crest, the more authority the Veloci holds. Most Veloci are somewhat small, with a pretty diminutive crest. These are called Velociprey, and are the natural form of the species. This is true for most Old World Raptor species in general, where the smaller ones are often called prey. Velociprey form large packs that prowl the green and mild regions of the Old Continent, being particularly active in the southern Schrade region. When the pack spots something that demands their intervention, like prey or an intruder, the Velociprey engage in one of the most bizarre hunting strategies seen in the area. All Veloci, no matter how small, grow one enlarged claw on their feet, its edge being significantly more deadly than any other weapon the species possesses. In combat, Velociprey begins surrounding their target, vocalizing aggressively while hopping around it in an attempt to cause confusion. Then, one after another, the Velociprey will attempt to leap over their target, aiming to lacerate it from above with their extended foot claws. By doing this repeatedly, a pack of Velociprey can easily shred an opponent to ribbons. But such a hunting strategy requires a leader. One key aspect of Old World Raptors is that their social hierarchies are organized around alpha leaders, so-called drones. These drones are large individuals who have their bodies altered through hormonal flushes when they prove themselves capable of leading the pack. In the Veloci, every pack of Velociprey is led by a large velocidrome. Its large orange crest describes its dominance, and the velocidrome is a shrewd leader. While it may hunt directly alongside the velociprey, velocidromes are also known to send out small groups of their brethren to scout out an area. When a velocidrome does join in battle, it uses its increased size and additional slashing claws on its hands to deal the killing blow. Its modified vocal organ, called a screamer sac, allows it to issue complex commands to its pack, further increasing their deadliness. The Veloci are, perhaps more so than any other monster, extremely closely tied to humans. Their abundance near human settlements makes them a serious threat to livestock and farms, and thus culling their numbers is considered a regular task for hunters. But they are not merely pests. Veloci scales are highly versatile in blacksmithing, and the skin under the scales is quite valuable as well. Their bodies provide numerous materials that have become cornerstones of the Shradian trade economy. In fact, historically, it is not an understatement to say that the history of the Shrade region would have played out drastically differently if the Veloci hadn't existed and hadn't provided much of the initial economic value that eventually led traders, merchants, and hunters to the area. As the Veloci were being studied initially, their lives presented one mystery that no guild scholar could solve at the time. Every so often, a white velociprey would be sighted, identical to its brethren in everything but coloration, its scales a paler blue that teeters on pure white. It was not sexual dimorphism, as it was known that velociprey looked the same whether they're male or female, and it was not albinism, since the eyes remained unchanged. For a long time, these white velociprey were a mystery, one that would see its solution arrive from the other side of the world. In the northeast of the old continent lie the Furahia Mountains, a harsh and frigid landscape ruled by towering peaks and ice-laden plains. Few settlements exist here. It wasn't until fairly recently that this area was fully charted and subsequently saturated with research expeditions. Many new species were recorded for the first time, and among them, a new type of Old World raptor, a white species of velociprey. This discovery finally explained the white velociprey in Shrade. This discoloration was likely a common mutation that continues to appear in regular Veloci, and that, many generations ago, caused some populations affected by that mutation to migrate and then speciate into their own new species. This mutation likely increased the affected Veloci's cold resistance, hence why the emergent population found their new home here in Furahia. Following this revelation, the newly discovered bird wyvern was classified as another species of the Veloci family, but given its own common name, the Jia. The Jia wear their close relation to the Veloci on their sleeves, as they resemble their cousins very strongly. Their discolored skin and different colored crest are the main visual differences. Behaviorally, however, the Jia display some more distinct characteristics. Their basic social structure and hunting methods are generally the same. Packs of Jia prey that kill by lacerating prey with their foot claws, coordinated and ruled by an alpha male, the Jiadrome. There are, however, two key differences. For one, the Jia underwent an adaptation that allows them to use their screamer sac to store and cool down liquid. This icy mix can then be spit at prey, where it immediately freezes due to the ambient temperatures. Using this projectile attack, Jia first freeze their prey in place before commencing their signature leap assault. The Geodrome is even more proficient at this attack, able to spit out blobs of freezing liquid with ease. This ability has, by contrast, never been observed in white Velociprey in Shade, which is generally seen as evidence that the Gia population split off from the Veloci some time ago and developed this freezing projectile ability separately from the mutation to their skin. The other main difference lies in their social structure. Veloci live in decently sized packs, led by a single Velocidrome, and are hostile to other Veloci packs. But the Gia have been observed to actually cooperate across packs, even fusing two packs together to form a mega pack, led by two Geodromes simultaneously. This tendency for cooperation might be a consequence of the icy environment of Furahia. When energy is precious and hard to replenish due to a lack of food, it would be foolish to waste it on territorial disputes with the equally hungry of your own species, which is already predisposed to social behavior. Instead, by banding together, the Gia maximize their effectiveness and are able to take down larger prey, feeding the entire pack reliably. While the Veloci live close to humans, and the Gia were actively sought out to be researched, the other two prominent species of Old World raptors are much more reclusive. And we all ought to be thankful for that. For they are both fierce predators, and one of them is considered a walking nightmare to most fledgling hunters. South of the Shrade region, on the southwestern peninsula, lies Sekumea, a massive desert region where only the strongest survive. In this hot wasteland, one species of the supposedly weak Old World raptor manages to thrive. The Gen. Similar in their general build to the Veloci, the Gen are covered in a much tighter coat of scales, colored in dull yellows, oranges, and greens. Their crests are not one single massive structure, but rather two angled sails. Most strikingly, the Gen possess two massive fangs on their upper jaws, which are always proudly on display. These fangs are the source of the terror they inspire. Lacking the distinct toe claw of the Veloci, the Gen hunt using a different strategy. Utter mayhem. When the pack spots a target, every member descends upon it one after another with one goal only: pierce the victim's skin with their fangs. Because in their fangs, and in lesser concentration in the Gen's saliva itself, lies a powerful paralytic venom, able to fully immobilize creatures 10 times more massive than the Gen. The pack's main objective is to get that venom into their target, which instantly ends the fight. To that end, the mighty leader of the pack, the Gendrome, with its enlarged crests and longer fangs, commands its brethren into fierce battle, a braying and screeching mass of fang and venom. These hunts are so chaotic that the tightly overlapping scale coats of the Gen are believed to be as seamless as they are to protect them from accidentally paralyzing each other. Once the target is fully envenomated and unable to move, the nightmare begins. Gen are not particularly patient, and will immediately begin to rip and tear into their bounty, which is usually still alive at that point. Gen prey venom is a muscular toxin which paralyzes the body, and only the body. The mind remains active, able to hear, see, and feel pain. The victim is thus forced to watch and feel themselves be eaten alive as the Gen pack begins digging into them, usually starting around the abdominal area. It could be hours before death finally sets in. A truly horrifying way to go, and a core reason as to why research into this particular species remains so scarce. One oddity that has been observed despite this difficulty is that genprey seem to be able to act without the leadership of a gendrome, as they are much more widespread than their leader. The small genprey can be found all over Sekumea, and have even been sighted in the swamps near Dondorma, much further north, while gendrome are generally only found in the dunes near the desert town of Rekusara. It isn't quite clear why this is the case, but some scholars have suggested that the immense efficacy of the paralytic gen venom is just so strong that the small genprey can make do on their own, if need be. While the gen prowl the dry lands of the old continent, the fourth species of Old World raptors sticks to the most humid zones on the landmass. It is the rarest member of the family, and perhaps the most bizarre one. The Io are in many ways an odd sight. For one, they do not have scales in the traditional sense. Instead, their bodies are covered in moist, leathery red skin that is not quite as resistant to claw and sword as a coat of scales would be, with scales only being present in a scant few places on their bodies. However, this hide allows for extremely sophisticated temperature and moisture regulation, allowing the Io to live in hot, humid climates effortlessly, and even filter out waterborne bacteria and other harmful substances. What is equally as unusual is the Io's head, an odd, curved mass of porous tissue, the crest directly fused into the head, and a small mouth with very few needle-shaped teeth. Under the lower jaws, on their throats, these wyverns grow a solid lump, their infamous venom sac. Io are highly toxic in every sense of the word, as they develop and concentrate an extremely powerful venom in their throats, ready to be spat at any unlucky target. Like all Old World raptors, the Io also group up into packs of Io prey, led by one massive Iodrome and its enlarged, huge crest. Unlike the Gen, however, Io prey packs are completely reliant on their drome, and are known to disperse if their leader is slain. The Iodrome commands the Io prey during their hunts, which are focused on dousing their target with venom. This is achieved through a two-tier assault. The Io prey leap around the target, disorienting it while spraying it with small amounts of venom, weakening it continuously. Once the target is so tired that it will not be able to evade an oncoming attack, the Iodrome will play its riskiest card and vomit a massive amount of its stored venom onto the target. Producing the venom is time-consuming, so this move is reserved for when it is sure to hit. But once it does, the fight is over. Io venom is so powerful that it can even affect true wyverns. It is in fact considered a case of over-evolution, as this degree of toxicity is complete overkill for the Io's usual targets: giant insects. The reason the species lacks claws and combat teeth and focuses on venom in the first place is believed to be to successfully kill Neopterons without destroying their delicate insectoid bodies. In the process of specializing into this niche, the Io have developed into extremely dangerous toxin factories. Their venom even has a few additional quirks to it. For example, it completely negates the scent of anything it kills, meaning that no other creature can sniff out the kill and come to steal it from the Io. Not that anyone would really try in the first place. Since they pretty much exclusively eat prey that is saturated in toxins, the Io are entirely immune to most poisons and are extremely sturdy in general. An Iodrome can easily shake off multiple hits from another monster without flinching. More crucially, especially for hunters and researchers, because they so often ingest their own toxic compounds, every single body part of the Io is positively doused in toxicity. These wyverns are deadly to the touch, a defense mechanism in the wild, and an all-or-nothing trial for eager blacksmiths, bent on using the valuable bones and hides of the Io for armor and weapons. Only experts are trusted with the poison removal process. The cunning craftsman will not throw the venom away, but instead use it to enhance their next client's weapons. At a hefty price increase, of course. It is tempting to categorize the world, to rank its creatures, to think of them as unilaterally superior or inferior to each other. It is all too easy to look at the gawking, awkward bird wyverns and assume them to be at the bottom of all things. But reality is rarely so easy. While they may lack wings, spikes, and sophisticated elemental abilities, the old world raptors are ravenous specialists that thrive in the niches they have carved for themselves. And those that find themselves staring down a Velocity, being bit by a gen, or being suffocated by the venom of the Io, would certainly not call these wyvern weak. The most successful killers in nature are not fanged monsters and venomous insects. It is not even human and vivarian hunters. Instead, the single most common terminators of life are assumption and prejudice. It is only natural to rely on one's experience and knowledge, but when engaging with the wild frontier, assuming to already know what's ahead and judging every book by its cover is a wonderful way to meet an early end. Nature is nothing if not varied, powerful predators coming in every form imaginable. A common tale of assumption within the Hunters Guild concerns the qualities of wyverns. In the early days of monster hunting, what constituted a wyvern was a somewhat narrow definition. A true wyvern has wings, scales, claws, and can breathe fire or poison. Between the earbirds, the wraths, the armor wyvern, and more, this crude category seemed to hold up initially. But one day, long before any guild truly existed, a group of hunters scurried out of the swampy forests near today's Dundorma, exhausted and terrified. They blabbed to anyone who would listen. They spoke of a moss-covered beast that had erupted out of a large burrow, an unsightly maw with no discernible face. Over time, reports of a faceless, scaleless wyvern began accumulating. What exactly this creature had instead of scales was hotly debated. Some hunters confirmed it to be covered in moss, while others described it as caked in mud, while one account even swore that the beast's body was adorned with blood and viscera. As hunting became a more serious and established profession, it was decided to finally squash this mystery once and for all. A party was sent out into the areas where the beast had been sighted recently, with the aim of categorizing and confirming its existence. Many later regretted joining that expedition. Not because it failed, but precisely because it succeeded. And in its success, it uncovered the existence of the Kezu. Unsurprisingly classified under the infraorder Alienu Dracone, Strange Wyvern, the Kezu is a highly unusual flying wyvern. Instead of patrolling the skies and terrorizing the lands, Kezu generally live in cave networks and seem to prefer the dank and moist areas of the lands. They are also found in frigid regions, such as the Furahia Mountains, but not because they like the temperature. Rather, the mountain range is simply a place with lots of caves, and while the Kezu can stomach the temperatures during the warm seasons, when even Furahia is almost bearable, they are known to migrate into swamps and marshes during the winter to escape the extreme cold of the mountains. But first and foremost, Kezu seek out caves, for their bodies have entirely developed to thrive in those desolate conditions. For one, they have no eyes, and if they ever did, they degenerated into nothingness throughout millennia of evolution in the pitch-black darkness of the caves. In fact, the Kezu has no visible facial features. Its head is a smooth tip on its tube-like neck, its only feature being a red-lipped mouth filled with sharp, pointed teeth. Its tail is short and stubby at first glance, but if necessary, the Kezu can open the tip to reveal another gaping hole, also covered in teeth-like bone spikes on the inside. But beyond anything else, the Kezu stands out for its complete lack of scales. Instead, it is covered in a pale white skin, which is moist and slimy at all times. The skin's stickiness is likely why reports of the beast spoke of moss and mud. The sighted Kezus were likely just covered in muck sticking to their bodies. It also has no claws on its feet, and only grows 2 vestigial claw bumps on its wing arms. These are, however, completely useless. Confirming the existence of the Kezu was certainly a major breakthrough in understanding monsters and their diversity, but much work remained. First and foremost, how does a creature with no visible sensory organs, no defensive body structures, and an extremely limited habitat even survive? Over time, these unusual questions received even more unusual answers. The key lies in what quality the Kezu embodies and seeks out: moisture. Its body and its preferred environments are both wet and humid, which plays a crucial part in how the Kezu survives. Instead of tracking prey in its surroundings by sight, the Kezu utilizes 2 senses, both invisible but acutely tuned. Around its face, and especially on its lips, the Kezu grows olfactory receptors, allowing it to pick up and track scents. The immense moisture around the mouth enhances this ability, as scent particles are easier trapped on wet surfaces. This sense is entirely localized in the head, as evidenced by the Kezu sniffing the air around it by bobbing its head. This allows the Kezu to track its prey directly just by smelling it. Its second sense is even more impressive. The Kezu is one of a shockingly small number of animals to possess electroreception, the ability to sense weak electric signals in ambient humidity. Whenever a creature moves a muscle, a small electric pulse is emitted as a side effect of the brain sending the move signal to that muscle. Electroreception exploits this side effect by using those pulses to track and sense moving animals. This ability usually only works underwater, but the Kezu makes it work through a few choice modifications to the concept. Both the Kezu and its preferred caves are always covered in a layer of moisture, which provides the humidity needed for the electroreception to function. Additionally, Kezu run a weak current throughout their skin, originating from a thunder organ in their bodies. This current reacts to environmental electric pulses as well, further enhancing and synergizing with its electroreception. The result of this sensory setup is that in a humid environment, the blind Kezu can see just fine, much to the detriment of its prey. Of course, The downside to this specialization is that Kezu are pretty vulnerable whenever they leave their caves, be it to migrate or to pursue a stubborn victim. That is why they generally do not actively hunt, and instead wait until prey wanders into their domain by itself. This happens quite often, as caves often seem to provide security, especially in the kinds of environments the Kezu is found in. So when a Kelby or a Popo wanders into a cavern, hoping for shelter from the elements, the Kezu begins its assault. In complete silence, the wyvern approaches its quarry, sometimes on land and sometimes even by crawling on walls or the cave ceiling. It has the suction cups on its feet and in its tail to thank for that. Since the prey's eyesight is reduced to near zero in the pitch black of the cave, and the Kezu's footsteps make no sounds that would seem out of place in a waterlogged cave, it is nearly impossible to see the Kezu coming. Once in position, the Kezu will unleash a most ghoulish weapon. Its neck is surrounded by flabby skin and folded muscles which, when needed, allow the wyvern to extend its neck to over twice the length of its body. This is made possible by a complex interplay between highly cartilaginous neck vertebrae, immensely powerful muscles, and flexible blood vessels. The result is that a Kezu's maw can latch onto prey at almost any distance and from any angle, as the extended neck is also highly mobile. Once the mouth latches on, it begins devouring the prey without bothering to kill it directly. Instead, it will experience a slow, agonizing death as the Kezu gradually swallows and shreds the victim with its teeth. Should, against all odds, a target manage to escape that initial attack, the Kezu has one more trick up its sleeve. The thunder organ in its body is able to temporarily strengthen and even redirect the current running through the Kezu's skin, for example, electrifying the wyvern's mouth, allowing it to spit orbs of crackling thunder. Usually, these orbs would not be powerful enough to do anything and dissipate immediately. But because of the moisture in the environment, on the walls and floors of the cave, these pulses can latch onto these layers of moisture and travel quite far, and quickly. When they collide with a living being, they paralyze it, allowing the Kezu to immobilize fleeing prey. This ability can also be used defensively. By momentarily spiking the current in its skin, the Kezu can create an aura of thunder around itself for a brief moment, pushing away troublesome enemies. A stretching neck, an eyeless maw, and immobilizing thunder. The Kezu is a creature of nightmares. And somehow, none of that compares to the true reason every hunter fears the Kezu. For those that find themselves immobilized by it may suffer a fate far worse than death. Kezu are hermaphrodites, which means that every individual possesses both male and female organs, and the Kezu is able to fertilize itself whenever it feels inclined to do so. The results of this are Kezu whelps, tiny larvae that resemble a wingless adult. These juveniles develop inside the Kezu's tail and are extremely vulnerable, as they lack the cold resistance and thunder organ of their parent. In order to grow, Kezu whelps need to stay in a warm, humid environment with plenty of fresh food, preferably animal protein that they don't have to hunt. Which are all qualities of a living body. So, with no discernible pattern, adult Kezu will sometimes abstain from eating paralyzed prey and instead inject the living victim with its young. The hapless host will then, in mistaken relief, be able to escape, now carrying the next generation of its tormentor. Over the coming weeks, the victim will experience ceaseless agony and searing pain as the growing whelps devour it from within, wriggling their way across the body while instinctually avoiding as many vital organs as possible. Their warm, fleshy cradle must survive until they can fully emerge, after all. Finally, the whelps burst out into the world, killing their tortured host in the process. These whelps will soon grow wings and go on to terrorize caves all around the region. This will go on until they are either killed in revenge by a prey that was a tad too much for them, hunted by a professional, or suffer their predetermined natural death. Kezu grow weak as they become older, both due to natural degradation and lack of food due to more failed predation attempts. This leads to muscle atrophy, starting and ending with the neck. The muscles that allow the Kezu to stretch and lift its head are incredibly dense and large, and need a high amount of energy to maintain. Old Kezu eventually fail to meet that maintenance, and become so weak that they are unable to lift their neck and head. Because of this, they are unable to feed, and this quickly causes them to starve to death. Luckily for everyone, Kezu are somewhat rare, as the conditions they need to thrive are quite specific. They are only found in the Old World, and only near caves, which limits their habitat significantly, only having been seen in the Arcolis, Erude, and Furahia regions, as well as the swamplands near Dandorma. However, it is not only the white Kezu that roams the land. Rarely, hunters will return with reports of a red Kezu, the only known variation in the Kezu family. While the Hunters Guild's hunters and quest maidens tend to call these subspecies for simplicity's sake, the exact relation between the white and red Kezu is still hotly debated. As far as observable differences go, there aren't many. Red Kezu are sturdier, with a red pigmented hide that offers more protection. Their saliva is also quite corrosive, much more so than with the white Kezu. But most crucially, the thunder organ of the red Kezu is many times more powerful than that of the white one. It is in fact so powerful that it can enhance the wyvern's electroreception to work even outside of caves, while also allowing the use of its electricity balls and pulses outside as well, meaning that red Kezu can put up a fight even in the broad open daylight. This, in theory, makes the red Kezu a more effective hunter. However, one idiosyncratic observation was that the red Kezu, despite seeming more offensive and robust, are actually quite a lot rarer than the white Kezu. This puzzled researchers for some time, since a more successful strategy should, in theory, create a more successful species, before one more discovery opened the way for new theories. The white Kezu were observed to vehemently avoid direct sunlight, implying that their skin is sensitive to it, even through their layer of moisture. This behavior was not observed in red Kezu. Scholars recognized this as a possible sign of albinism and quickly began to build a new hypothesis. The white and red Kezu are the same species, but currently on the cusp of speciation. The red Kezu are the species' original appearance, initially adapted to live solely in caves, but recently evolved to live a hybrid lifestyle of both caves and outdoor hunting. The white individuals are then albinos, whose white, photosensitive skin pushed them back into the caves exclusively. Over time, the hypothesis argues, white Kezu embraced their species' original lifestyle and began hyper-specializing to cave life, reducing in size and shrinking its thunder sac, thus requiring less nutrition to survive as they shed everything that isn't necessary to thriving in caves. This may be causing the albino Kezu's predatory success to skyrocket, as an exclusive cave life seems to suit the creature much better than the hybrid approach of the red Kezu. After all, even with its enhanced thunder and sturdier body, the red Kezu is still demonstrably not particularly adept at drawn-out outdoors combat, and other wyvern can kill it somewhat easily. As a result, the white Kezu, originating from a genetic mutation that caused them to display albinism, might be in the process of establishing their own new species, as they outcompete the red Kezu, which gradually becomes rarer over time as a result. While this hypothesis explains some of the observations, it is still far from being accepted by the entire guild. As far as hunters are concerned, red and white are simply subspecies of each other. Caves inspire an odd cocktail of emotions. They are frightening, yes, dark and unsettling, but in a land of storms, blizzards, and wyverns, its walls and depths may seem like a worthwhile compromise in the name of safety. The Kezu exploits that compromise, descends upon those seeking refuge, and rewards their curiosity with suffering and death. A true terror from the cave, and the squelching specter of many hunters' nightmares. To venture into the land is to seek surprises. Even veterans can and will find wonders on their journeys, for the world is infuriatingly dense. 7 lifetimes one could spend studying a single species of bird and would still not reveal all of its secrets, still not unravel its mysteries. Every corner of existence is a miracle worth witnessing, and it is our duty to keep our hearts open to be that witness. This is a lesson hard learned by young upstart hunters looking to join the Hunters Guild. Propelled by fiery-eyed ambition, they must first learn the ropes of not just hunting, but of how to respect the world in which they hunt. It is an exercise in humility, and as such, the guild often has young hunters focus on tracking down monsters of the least prestigious clade, the bird wyvern. Entirely contained within the suborder Avepoda, which contains 3 infraorders itself, bird wyvern are often the first hurdles on a hunter's journey. Generally, the raptorial runner wyvern usher in the hunter's career, as almost every region has a few packs that need regular culling. Once a greenhorn has proven they can at least hold a sword the right way up, it isn't long before they are tasked with a different kind of bird wyvern. The infraorder Veravacerte houses the true bird wyverns, which are defined as bird wyverns that can actually fly, as opposed to the wingless runner wyvern. This is by far the most diverse clade of bird wyvern, and one that many rising hunters will eventually have to encounter. Specifically, many greenhorns will be tasked with hunting earbirds, and their most common representative, the Yankutku. Being found in many forests and jungles of the Old World continent, the Yankutku is a medium-sized bird wyvern with a varied coat of scales and shells. Its wings are leathery and lean, and its face ends in a truly humongous beak. But as its infraorder Auriavis suggests, the most striking feature of the Yankutku are its massive ears. It's, all in all, a somewhat awkward-looking creature, and young hunters generally underestimate it. And that is precisely the point. The Yankutku has, for years now, served as a wake-up call for cocky greenhorns who think a mere handful of successful hunts make them experts. For the Jan Kutku is a surprisingly fascinating monster. Despite having wings and being part of Vera Vacerte, it is actually not that keen on flying. Most of its food lives underground, after all. So instead, the Kutku generally waltzes around its territory on foot, stomping across the land in search of tasty morsels. Its massive ears allow it to pick up subtle sounds coming from the ground beneath it, and once it pins down the right spot, it puts its beak to use. The massive, shovel-like underjaw allows the Kutku to dig up the soil and reach its favorite snack: massive earthworms and larvae hiding in the ground. On a good day, a Kutku can dig up dozens of such grubs, and the resulting holes in the ground serve as territory markings as well. Eastern Kutku living near Valhabar and in the Everwood are also known to prey on conchu, which live above ground. As a result, Eastern Kutku are actually harder to track, as they leave behind fewer holes. The life of a Kutku revolves around this prey in a very literal sense. In years with long stretches of hot temperatures, the grubs and earthworms thrive and multiply rapidly, causing a bountiful feast for the Kutku. The Kutku in turn take this prosperity and turn it into an extremely active breeding season. The males will compete with each other by comparing the volume of their roars, and before long, the loudest, most attractive males will get to mate. Years with extended hot seasons thus generally cause an explosion in Kutku populations shortly after. The now plentiful Kutku embolden each other, and before long, they descend onto the land as mischievous troublemakers, often going as far as to venture near human settlements. It is customary then to send out hunters to cull these populations, which benefits everyone. The settlements are freed from the danger of these wyverns, while the Kutku are restrained from entirely wiping out their food sources before they can recover. And the greenhorns sent out to deal with it get to find out why the Kutku is considered a test of their skills. The Jan Kutku appears quite timid upon first encounter. Its massive ears allow it to hear any enemy approaching, and once it has spotted them, the Kutku will initiate its threat display. By extending its wings and stomping its feet, the wyvern attempts to appear as large as possible, its ears extended to their maximum size. Then, it begins shrieking at an almost impossible volume. The secret lies in the ears. Their massive discs do not just catch sound, but also reverberate it, amplifying the Kutku's chirps into deafening roars. This display is usually quite effective, but should it fail, the Kutku will be forced to fight. Its massive beak can do tremendous damage with its pecks, and the armored, thin tail of the wyvern can function as a dangerous whip. When cornered, the Jan Kutku may stampede towards the enemy, aiming to trample them to death with its massive feet. But its most deadly weapon lies in its mouth. The Jan Kutku may seem like an odd bird, but it is nonetheless a wyvern, and as such, it holds within itself a flame sac. This organ allows the Jan Kutku to produce and store a liquid that ignites upon coming into contact with air. By spitting this liquid out of its beak, the Kutku is able to fling small fireballs at its target, allowing it to be dangerous even at a distance. However, all of these weapons aren't why the Jan Kutku is such a wall to greenhorn hunters. It's that the wyvern that wields them is deceptively smart. As hunters have culled them for many generations, Kutkus understand human weaponry to a rudimentary degree, and they know what they can get away with. For example, the shell of a Kutku is surprisingly dense and resistant, offering protection from both claw and blade. It is also extremely resistant to fire. The wyvern thus know that it can pressure a hunter if their sword isn't sharp enough. A cuckoo will also actively make use of its territory, fleeing and repositioning regularly in order to disorient and exhaust its attacker. This can be especially taxing on unprepared hunters, as both time and hunting tools are valuable resources that this strategy uses up. Add to this the fire breath, the intimidating size, and the shell of the cuckoo that blunts any but the sharpest blades, and a cuckoo hunt becomes an exercise of strategy, preparation, and environmental knowledge. And even more specifically, hunting a cuckoo trains hunters in how to fight wyverns of any kind, as it features many of the abilities seen in other wyverns, such as armor and elemental breath attacks. Because of this, successfully hunting a Jan cuckoo is considered a turning point in a hunter's career, and some greenhorns have even come to affectionately call the creature Cuckoo Sensei as a result. This role as a challenging adversary for new hunters is facilitated by the cuckoo's choice of habitat. They generally live anywhere with temperate, mild climates, while occasionally venturing into warmer jungle zones. This means that they are abundant in areas with often well-established settlements and relatively stable supply lines, allowing for the perfect training ground for hunters. With such a wide habitat and stable lifestyle, it isn't unusual for a family of monsters to speciate into various subspecies. In the case of the Jan cuckoo, there are two distinct species. The pink Jan cuckoo is by far the more abundant of the two, and the more timid. Their shells are strong and their flame breath fierce, but they prefer to tend to themselves and their grubs. Meanwhile, the blue Jan cuckoo is the rarer of the two species. Besides a differently colored shell, the blue cuckoo is almost identical to its pink brother. The shell itself is likely discolored due to a mutation to the shell's composition, which changes its pigmentation while also strengthening it. This is in essence very similar to what happened to the shell of the Azure Rathalos. Due to this enforced shell, blue Jan cuckoos are often more assertive and confrontative than the pink species. It knows it can get away with more thanks to its superior protection, so it will be more willing to engage in risky behavior. Blue cuckoos are thus generally assigned to more experienced hunters rather than the greenhorns, who are much better served going after the pink species primarily. Cuckoo hunts are, as a common and well-structured tradition, generally quite uneventful these days. While some young upstarts may get hurt or spooked, cases of cuckoo causing severe injury or even death have declined steadily over the guild's lifetime. While these wyvern can absolutely kill, the increasing amount of knowledge and nurturing precautions for greenhorns have made it an exceptionally rare outcome. However, in the old days, hunters sent out to hunt Jan cuckoo in the Schrade region would sometimes not return, and sometimes they would return only in pieces. For a period, cuckoo hunts seemed cursed to lead to death and misery, as what was usually a beginner's task became one of the single deadliest quests in the region. The few survivors who came back had their spirits utterly broken, babbling about a dark cuckoo that had ripped their squad to pieces. One survivor, whose eyes had been plucked out violently, said that the last thing he saw was a black wolf covered in wyvern scales. This problem continued until a squad of elite hunters scoured the affected region and found the culprit. Not a Jan cuckoo, but a close relative, a fellow earbird. The Jan garuga. Superficially, the Jan garuga somewhat resembles the Jan cuckoo, and it has been proposed that it evolved out of a cuckoo-like ancestor not too long ago. The garuga's general shape is easily mistaken for a cuckoo, a mistake most of the anguished hunters likely made. But upon closer inspection, their physiology is quite different. The shell is indeed a much darker color, a deep purple that dips into blackened gray in places. Its spiked beak is a muted grey as well, and white puffs of fur grow in unseemly patches near the head and neck. The purple ears are much smaller than those of the kutku, and the tail ends in a trident of rigid barbs instead of a simple tip. If appearances weren't enough to distinguish the garuga from the kutku, its behavior certainly is. While the kutku is timid until provoked, the garuga is actively aggressive and needlessly violent. It will attack immediately upon spotting any intruders to its territory, and it won't relent until its target has been reduced to fleshy paste. It has all the combat abilities of the kutku and then some. Its beak is sharper, still adept at digging up grubs, but more specialized in crushing skulls and tearing flesh. Its flame breath is significantly more powerful, not mere clumps of hot liquid, but destructive blasts of a white-hot inferno. Its shell is many times tougher than even that of the blue kutku, and only the sharpest tools can as much as scratch the garuga's hide. Its small ears do not amplify its voice as much as that of the kutku, but they don't need to, as the screech of the garuga produced by its powerful chest muscles is already powerful enough to rattle and disorient any who stand near it. The wings of the garuga may look somewhat similar to the weak flappers of the kutku, but they are much stronger. The garuga is in fact quite capable of delicate aerial maneuvers and prolonged flight. Additionally, its tail is no mere whip. The barbs and spines on its end are filled with a highly potent venom that weakens the constitution of any who are injected, turning any would-be enemy into an easy victim. Using these adaptations, the young garuga wreaks havoc across any ecosystem it appears in, dominating the food chain merely by existing. It is in fact such an oppressive force that hunters have even witnessed it pushing back the likes of Zinogre and Deviljho. This stark increase in power is partially due to biological differences, but also due to the garuga's disposition. It is a relentless assailant, overwhelming foes with ceaseless violence. Garugas are in fact known to actively provoke fights that seem to be of no obvious purpose to them. They simply seem to really enjoy violence. And yet, the garuga is not merely propelled by brute force. For it is a scheming, highly intelligent creature, even more so than the kutku. For instance, the young garuga are often seen escaping from, or entirely avoiding, man-made traps, and they are exceptionally skilled at tracking down their next adversary. Some hunters even swear that young garuga have a grudge against humans specifically. But its most fearsome ability is that of mimicry. As a monster that constantly fights other wyverns, the young garuga will, over the course of its life, learn to imitate many of the moves it sees. From the backflips of a Rathian to the tail whips of a Puke Puke, a garuga fights using all the techniques it has witnessed in the past. This naturally makes the older individuals that much more dangerous, as they have a larger arsenal of trained moves. Over their long lives, young garuga accumulate not just skills, however, but also scars. It is in fact rather uncommon to see a fully grown, scarless young garuga. The most scarred individuals, whose ears and eyes have been brutalized in fights long past, are even classified by the guild as a variant, scarred young garuga. These older veterans distinguish themselves mostly through the aforementioned arsenal of mimicked skills, and are known to be even more aggressive than their younger brothers. Many of their biological abilities, such as their flame sac, are also often improved, likely a result of years of honing them against enemies. Curiously, no one suffers at the hands of the young garuga as much as the young kutku. Garuga are known to relentlessly hunt down any kutku they spot, and they seem to take special pleasure in killing their close relatives. One key observation that the guild made is that Garuga seem to follow the Kutku's migration patterns, indicating that they actively seek them out. One possible reason for this, besides mere bloodlust, was postulated when one researcher observed a young Garuga laying eggs into the at the time abandoned nest of a young Kutku. That same researcher has since insisted that this must mean that the Garuga are brood parasites, creatures that trick other species into raising their young, and that this is the reason they pursue Kutku so consistently. The guild has, to this day, stalled on confirming this theory. Interestingly, the young Garuga has been spotted in the guiding lands of the New World, a continent on which the Kutku is entirely absent. While some have suggested that the Garuga outcompeted the Kutku in this new environment and drove the New World population to extinction, this particular wrinkle in the Garuga's story remains a mystery for now. Another feature that allows the young Garuga to be so oppressive is its size, which is larger than that of the Kutku and allows for heavy physical attacks, as well as enhanced durability. Young Garuga are however known to exhaust more quickly than young Kutku, which might be a result of their increased weight. This adaptation, however, seems to be quite unstable, as many miniature young Garuga chicks are found dead, born with severe cases of hormonal instability and dwarfism. It might even be the primary cause of infant death in the species. Garuga that are born too small simply can't keep up with the immense degree of violence in their life, and perish. Usually, that is. Rarely, exceedingly rarely, a dwarf young Garuga will survive its early years and grow into adulthood, keeping its small stature and compensating for it in other ways. These are Garuga deviants, variations of the species that appear extremely rarely and pose a significant threat to men and monsters alike. A deviant young Garuga is called Deadeye young Garuga, as many of these fierce dwarf wyvern develop a single glowing eye over the course of their battles. Why that happens is unknown. What is known is that Deadeye Garugas are extremely dangerous. Their small size makes them much faster and more nimble than their regular sized brothers, and the hormonal oddities of their bodies often result in overly developed venom glands. In fact, the skin of many Deadeye Garugas becomes discolored due to just how much poison is being pumped through their bodies and into their tissues, making them extremely deadly to encounter. What's worse is that Deadeye Garugas have been seen actively chasing down and tracking hunters, specifically venturing near hunting settlements, seemingly to provoke human intervention. What is probable is that these Garuga live a life of even more violence than their regular species, and as such, they are even more hateful towards anything that they see. Due to this, the appearance of a Deadeye is treated extremely seriously, and only hunters with special permits are allowed to attempt to slay them. The variety of our world is nearly limitless. No matter where one looks, wonder awaits. Even creatures that may seem simple and dull at first often hide a universe of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Those that look upon the earbirds and think them lesser wyverns would do well to reconsider. For both the Kutku and the Garuga are fiendishly clever, imaginatively complex, and surprisingly wondrous creatures. The natural world is no stranger to the bizarre and the exceptional. Life, after all, comes in all shapes, sizes, and dispositions. Even a regular civilian is quite used to hearing tales of unusual creatures, and a monster hunter is unlikely to go far without encountering at least a few odd adversaries. But even the grandest tales and tallest lies are often confined to forests, cliffsides, and perhaps the skies. Few ever tell of that which lurks beneath us, the burrowers and swimmers of the monster frontier. A shame, for they represent some of the most outlandish beings known to the guild. The first of these creatures was discovered after numerous reports of man-eating dunes began flooding out of the Sekumea region. This area, located on the southwestern peninsula of the Old World continent, is a harsh desert that has been known to swallow careless travelers, spitting out their sun-bleached bones. But these reports were highly unusual. According to some witnesses, the dunes themselves had begun moving, clouds of sand purposefully torpedoing towards man and animal alike, dragging them into a deep desert grave within mere moments. The guild quickly determined this to be the work of a monster. They had no idea of what kind, but it at least seemed more likely than sentient, flesh-eating sand mounds. The dispatched team of hunters and researchers then quickly discovered that this phenomenon was in fact caused by a flock of sand-dwelling Piscine wyvern. The Piscine wyvern classification has, since its initial proposal by the Scholarly Library of Mindgard, been a cause for much debate and controversy within the guild. On paper, their defining traits are somewhat simple. Wyvern that generally live submerged in water, often sporting fins and other fish-like features. The problem with this simple definition is that it doesn't hold up to even the most casual observation of Piscine wyvern. Some have wings, some don't swim in water, and many of them have lungs. And just when a working hypothesis of their origin had been established, a theory that proposed that they had actually branched off from flying wyvern, hence the wings and lungs, a new species was discovered on the new continent that entirely rebuked all of that. The guild thus classifies Piscine wyverns as its own order, Piscilacertis, itself containing 3 suborders into which all known Piscine wyverns are sorted. The majority of them are contained in just one suborder, Piscipoda, fish feet, defined by having semi-terrestrial hind legs and feet. It was into this suborder that the man-eating dunefish of Sekumea was sorted, properly described and classified under the name Cephalos. These hammer-headed wyvern exemplify the extreme difficulty of describing Piscine wyvern as a homogeneous group. While they do swim, they do so not in water, but through fine sand, patrolling the deserts of the peninsula in flocks that travel through the ground at extraordinary speeds. They are quite common in the deserts, and the only reason the guild hadn't discovered them earlier was that they are mostly nocturnal, generally only surfacing at night. Once they were discovered, however, their unusual bodies immediately garnered the attention of many researchers. Cephalos have surprisingly well-developed wings, and while they cannot be used to fly, they do seem to help in maneuvering through the sand and jumping out while surfacing. It was this feature that initially led researchers to believe that they were dealing with some sort of abnormal flying wyvern. But as the life of the Cephalos was gradually uncovered, its wings became its least interesting feature. Cephalos are almost entirely blind. After all, eyesight would not be of any use when swimming through sand. Instead, they use their hearing and skin to feel out vibrations and sounds in the sand, allowing them to maneuver quite accurately across the dune plains. It also helps that deserts are generally quite empty, and so most of the time, the only source of vibrations will be other living beings. Their hammer-shaped head is specialized in pushing sand to the side, allowing the creature to reach extremely high speeds considering that they're pushing through a solid medium. Using these abilities, the Cephalos home in on any unfortunate target before preying upon it in a most gruesome fashion. As they approach their victim, the Cephalos flock will stick out their fins to protrude out from the sand. In these fins, the Cephalos store a paralyzing venom that is injected by brushing the fin tips on the skin of another creature. By swimming past and around their target repeatedly, the flock quickly envenomates it, making it unable to move. Instead of simply killing it right there on the surface, the flock of Cephalos will then latch onto their prey and drag it with them deep into the sand, knowing that its silent, paralyzed screams will soon be suffocated by the dense sand flooding its orifices. Once deceased, the victim will be devoured by the sandfish. Cephalos are, however, not merely carnivores. As they swim, they swallow large amounts of sand, which a special organ in their abdomen then filters to extract valuable minerals and organic matter from. This way, Cephalos are constantly nourishing themselves as long as they swim, through the microparticles that they find in the sand. Adapted to life in the sand they may be, Cephalos cannot solely live underground. As bizarre as they can seem, they still have lungs, and so they must surface regularly in order to replenish their oxygen. This is when the Cephalos are at their most vulnerable. They are much less graceful on land, as their heavy wyvern feet allow them only to slowly stomp across the dunes. But even then, the Cephalos are not entirely defenseless. The sand that is filtered out from their digestive system after they swallow it is not simply discarded, but instead stored in a specialized sand sac. This sac can regurgitate the sand into the wyvern's mouth at will. The roof of the Cephalos mouth secretes a thick type of secondary saliva, an adhesive mucus whose main purpose is to mix with the regurgitated sand and form hard clumps of sandy mud. These clumps can then be spat by the Cephalos as a projectile, allowing it to ward off adversaries. The most powerful defense and offense of a flock of Cephalos is their pack leader, the massive Cephadrome. Transformed by a hormonal flush, these immense wyvern are generally at the heart of any Cephalos flock. While they borrowed the name drome from the alpha leaders of Old World raptors, Cephadromes do not actually lead the flock. There doesn't seem to be any kind of hierarchy or social dynamic at play. Rather, a flock of Cephalos simply naturally follows a Cephadrome for its strength and durability. Their congregation is merely a sound survival strategy. And indeed, a Cephadrome is a fierce protector. Twice the size of a normal Cephalos, all of its physical abilities are enhanced. Its paralyzing venom is more potent, its sand sac is larger, and its darkened hide is more durable. It is even more longevous. A Cephadrome can live up to twice as long as a Cephalos. Throughout the year, the Cephalos flocks travel the night deserts, protected by their Cephadrome, always looking for food. But beyond mere survival, they are also waiting. Waiting for the wet season. As the storms rage in the skies above Secumea, various low areas in the desert become temporarily waterlogged. And this is crucial to the very existence of the Cephalos. Despite being so adapted to life in the sand, Cephalos can only lay their eggs in water, perhaps a leftover from a previous ancestor. After the eggs have been laid in the temporary pools, the flock leaves again, leaving the eggs to hatch by themselves. By the time the next generation actually hatches, their nursery pool will have shrunk into a small, muddy puddle. The juvenile Cephalos are then on a time limit. They instinctively know how to swim through water, but they must adapt to swimming in sand as well before their little pond dries up. Ideally, as the moisture around them vanishes, their swimming ability increases, allowing them to eventually attain the agility of their parents. Once the nursing pool has entirely dried up, the cephalos that manage to adapt venture out on their own, to either grow into a cephadrome or assimilate into an existing flock. Only in these early years can the true skin of the cephalos be seen. Adults have their body covered in hardened brown sand, but in juveniles and adolescents, the brilliant blue scales are still visible for a short time, before their beauty, too, is swallowed by the desert. The cephalos were a wake-up call to many scholars, a reminder that the world is still brimming with the unknown. And it especially ignited an interest in the study of Piscine wyvern, a fire that led to the scouring of all nooks and crannies previously ignored. This fervor was not entirely scientific. Both the eggs and the liver of the cephalos were quickly discovered to be quite tasty, and they soon became the luxury food item we know them as today. As these new goods stimulated the economy and increased demand for hunters, the guild was eager to discover more Piscine wyvern like the cephalos, in hopes of furthering its prosperity with new exotic goods to circulate. Unfortunately for the Hunters Guild, what the researchers were about to discover was far from an easy source of valuable materials. Following up on old reports and oral histories regarding fish-like wyvern, scholars soon stumbled upon their next great discovery. And huge it was, in a very literal sense. Deep in the old jungle, lurking in the dark waters of the Arcolis region, they found the plesioth. The plesioth is, in one word, enormous. At the time of its discovery, it was considered the largest wyvern known to the guild, and even now, many years and discoveries later, it still holds its position as one of the most massive extant monsters. This size is only possible due to its aquatic lifestyle. The buoyancy of the water it lives in allows it to reach dimensions that would be crushing under the gravity of a land-dwelling lifestyle. The plesioth's enormity has inspired numerous legends in the regions it inhabits, and the guild found it while investigating reports of villagers watching a giant fish tear apart a jungle gharial, a species of mega crocodilian that itself reaches well over 10 meters in length. Soon after its discovery, the plesioth was declared the pinnacle of aquatic life. Despite its enormous size, its numerous fins allow it to swim at extraordinary speeds. Its wing-like main fins are especially powerful, and a plesioth at full speed can outswim just about anything. Its razor-sharp teeth and venomous fin spikes can make short work of any prey it hunts, and due to its muscular body, the plesioth can maneuver around the deep effortlessly. Just like the cephalos, it too is blind, and relies on its hearing to navigate the environment. In service of this, its hearing has become nearly supernatural, able to pick up on even the slightest intrusions into its territory. These adaptations make the plesioth one of the most successful predators of the Old World waters. They even compete with crocodilians in the highly coveted water edge predator niche, where they ambush and forcefully drown animals that get too close to the edge of the water. But also, just like the cephalos, the plesioth is not able to entirely abandon the surface. Plesioth also have lungs, which are tasked with the unenviable dilemma of delivering oxygen continuously to a positively massive body. The solution is that the plesioth doesn't just breathe through its protruding nose, but through its entire skin, allowing it to circulate oxygen rapidly and efficiently. There is a catch, however. The plesioth's skin can only breathe when it is wet, and it is extremely prone to drying out when not in direct contact with water. Paradoxically then, the moment the plesioth surfaces in order to replenish its oxygen, its breathing begins to immediately degrade. Prolonged exposure to air will in fact suffocate the plesioth. To mitigate this, plesioth only surface partially, sticking close to the water surface and poking out various body parts for short periods at a time for a quick and safe replenishment. While it is exceptionally rare, there are cases where plesioth venture on land. Despite their ecological success, they are believed to be rather unintelligent and are known to throw temper tantrums that cause them to be quite reckless. Should a prey have enraged and frustrated them by continuously evading, the plesioth will furiously chase it even onto dry land. Similarly, they can be lured onto terra firma by its favorite snack, frogs. For reasons unimportant to science, the plesioth love to eat frogs and will walk into obvious traps and dangers just for the chance of tasting one, including venturing on land. A grounded plesioth is a much slower, clumsier fighter compared to the graceful swimmer. Its large hind legs allow it to walk, but its massive size and weight make it quite unwieldy. While the plesioth can run, it can only do so for very short bursts at a time and only in a straight line. Most damningly, however, fighting on land is extremely risky as the wyvern's skin dries out rapidly. That is, however, not to say that a plesioth is easy prey on land. Its massive weight and size make even the clumsiest movements deadly to any that stand too close. Its tail swipes are lethal, but its most terrifying maneuver is its hip check, where it swings its entire weight hip first into an opponent. Unarmored humans have been observed to basically disintegrate into formless fleshy pulp from the sheer force of that impact. Engaging a plesioth is always risky. In the worst case scenario, a frustrated plesioth may turn to using its most powerful weapon. Just how the cephalos repurposes all the sand it swallows while burrowing, the plesioth also has an aqua sac that stores up the water it ingests while feeding. This water can be regurgitated through a nozzle in the plesioth's mouth, allowing it to shoot out a highly pressurized water beam. This attack is extremely lethal and can cut apart most targets, and the more intelligent plesioths will not wait to use it until they are cornered. They have been observed simply sticking their head out of the water to shoot their deadly beam at a dry target from the safety of their own domain. Luckily, plesioths are not particularly common. With a body that size, large populations are hard to maintain in just one spot, so they generally live alone and far apart from each other. Interestingly, plesioth can live in both freshwater and saltwater, as a regional variation has been found living in the open sea around the island district. The place where plesioth are most common, however, is actually just one specific body of water: the Grand Arcolis River, which originates in the Old Jungle and flows southwards throughout much of the southwestern peninsula, flowing underground and resurfacing multiple times. This river also forms various underground lakes, which are known to be a preferred habitat for the plesioth. Due to the sheer depth, width, and length of this river, the plesioth can travel all across the western edge of the Old World continent with ease. In an ironic twist, this allows the plesioth to even live in the oases and cave lakes of Sekumea, near where the cephalos dwell. With ecological success comes proliferation and specialization, and the plesioth is no exception. Beyond the freshwater and saltwater regional variations, the genus Plesioth also contains two distinct species. Plesioth squalus is the more common species, visually distinguishable by its dark blue coloration on its back and head. They are very fond of their watery habitats and only rarely venture to the surface at all. That cannot be said for the other species within the genus, Plesioth viridis, commonly known as the green plesioth. If its brilliant coat of emerald green backscales was not enough to distinguish it from the other plesioth species, the green plesioth's behavior certainly will. While it inhabits the same general ecosystems as the blue plesioth, the green plesioth is much more comfortable on land. Its colored scales are a lot better at retaining moisture, allowing it to stay on land for much longer. Additionally, its leg muscles are much more developed and adapted to carrying the wyvern's weight on land. This makes the green plesioth much more agile and secure on dry land, much to the terror of any prey that leaves the water in hopes for sanctuary. The depths below often terrify us. And for good reason. It is a domain exclusive to otherworldly creatures, predators and specialists with bodies and powers entirely alien to us. Monsters such as the Cephalos and the Plesioth remind us of how little power we hold in the abyss, and how easily we are dragged down, swallowed by the deep that they so easily conquer. The world is still a mysterious place. It's an odd thought. In a time when books, researchers, and documentarians exist, one might fall prey to the assumption that most of the world's knowledge has been gathered, that we have made serious progress in unraveling the secrets that surround us. That is, unfortunately, quite far from the truth. Even as the Guild's dedication to research grows, there is still so much left to learn and discover. The gaps in our knowledge are equal parts painful and inspiring. An ever-cited example of this is the lack of full life cycle records for most known monster species. While the Guild endeavors to maintain a full and detailed catalogue of all discovered and confirmed monsters, as well as their spot on the phylogeny, many of them are missing any and all information on the creature's youth and adolescence. It is a natural consequence of what the Guild is. While its research branch has steadily grown over time, the Hunters Guild's primary purpose is still to hunt and cull monsters that endanger human settlements and to natural balance. Unless a monster is being problematic, the Guild will likely not investigate it, or at the very least not make it a priority. These priority cases of problematic monsters generally involve adult monsters, and so it's only natural that the data collected during these incidents would be heavily skewed towards older, mature monster individuals and their physiology and behavior. Still, despite this reality, many researchers do lament the fact that for many monster species, there exists not even a single confirmed sighting of a juvenile. In turn, this makes the species whose life cycle and growth has been mostly mapped all the more valuable and fascinating. There aren't many, but those monsters whose life has been studied across all of its phases do exist. One such case are the monsters classified under the Armor Wyvern superfamily, the Gravios. Discovered very early on in the Guild's history, the Gravios is an enormous flying wyvern generally found in volcanic regions. While some aspects of its life, such as mating behavior, are still largely unstudied, the Gravios is one of the few creatures the Guild has a fairly complete ecological image of. Shortly after being born, Gravios are immediately abandoned by their mothers, left to fend for themselves. These juveniles look very different compared to adult Gravios. So different, in fact, that they were initially believed to be an entirely separate species and given their own name that has stuck around until today: Basarios. Despite their youth, Basarios are already some of the largest wyvern in the world. These humongous babies spend much of their time hiding and burrowing underground, using their degenerated wing arms as powerful digging tools, while their shovel-like head helps in carving out tunnels. The Basarios have but one mission: stay safe and grow larger. In order to transition into an adult Gravios, they must reach a certain size and lay the groundwork for the unique abilities that they will have as an adult. Luckily, Basarios are perfectly adapted to achieve these goals. Born with a thick grey shell right out the gate, they generally don't have to worry about predators and can focus on preparing for adulthood. Specifically, the Basarios must do 3 things: grow its muscles, enlarge its shell, and cultivate a bacterial colony in its gut. The first goal is the easiest one. By hiding in the soil and only letting its rock-like shell stick out, the Basarios camouflages itself as a boulder, waiting patiently for its prey. That comes in the form of large insectoids, Bnahabra and Altaroth generally. By lunging at them from their hiding spot, the Basarios can eat absurd amounts of these highly protein-rich insects in a single day, allowing its muscles and body to grow rapidly. The second and third goals are a little more tricky and depend on one another. The only way to grow the rocky shell is to ingest and process minerals and rocks. The Basarios can, however, not digest these materials by itself. It has to cultivate rock-eating bacteria in its gut. To solve this, the Basarios will start small, eating tiny rocks in hopes of also ingesting some of the bacteria it needs. As it works its way up to larger and larger amounts of rock and stone, it naturally swallows more and more rock bacteria, which begins gradually forming a consistent colony in the creature's body. Once properly established, the bacteria will live in symbiosis with the Basarios, processing and digesting the rocks it eats and allowing the wyvern to enhance and enlarge its massive rock shell from the materials gathered out of that process. Throughout this endeavor, the Basarios begins running into the issues that will plague it for its entire life. The process of digesting rocks leaves behind waste material, junk rock that needs to be stored in a specialized organ to be molten down later. This molten rock can be expelled for defensive purposes, but the Basarios is generally not quite proficient at that yet. More importantly, the process by which the bacteria dissolve and digest the minerals produces extreme amounts of both heat and gases of varying kinds, both of which cannot stay in the body for long without causing damage. The Basarios must then learn to use specialized vents across its underside to expel the heated gases regularly. Another burden that, when used intelligently, can function as a weapon. Luckily, the Basarios doesn't have much need for such weapons, as its size and thick shell protect it from most threats. After all, its mother didn't just abandon the Basarios in any random spot. Before laying their young, female Gravios scout out suitable areas with weaker predators and easy access to rocks and minerals, even venturing into areas they normally don't inhabit, such as deserts. So, despite being left behind by its mother, the Basarios is given a strong start in life by its body and the nursery its parent chose for it. Before long, the Basarios will have reached its desired size and begin its transformation. Its face will reshape into a slimmer shape, with a front-facing nose horn. Its rocky shell will fuse into a thick suit of homogeneous armor, and its tail will gain a spiked club at the tip. It will have become a Gravios. Shortly after, the newly matured Gravios will migrate away from its nursery and into the nearest volcano, where it will finally live out the unique lifestyle of its ancestors. Once matured, Gravios live essentially without any competition or real danger, due to two fascinating adaptations. For one, they can, for a limited time, completely submerge themselves in lava, allowing them free movement in their home volcanoes. This is an extraordinarily rare ability that usually requires eons of specialized evolution. The Gravios developed a particularly odd strategy to achieve this. Their tough shell is extremely fire resistant, so unless it stays submerged for multiple hours, the Gravios does not have to worry about its skin melting. But that is only half the problem. Even if the outer layer doesn't melt outright, heat still transfers across the wyvern's body and into its organs, where no protection can prevent the damage the lava's heat would do to the squishy insides. The Gravios solves this by, bizarrely, having all of its vital organs concentrated in the center of its body. Heart, lungs, stomach, liver, they all sit in a small area in the middle of the Gravios. This means that the time it takes the outside heat to reach any or all of these vital structures is maximized, allowing the Gravios more time in the lava. And this is where the work it put in as a juvenile benefits the Gravios. The larger its body and its shell, the more mass the heat has to pass through before reaching the wyvern's center. As the shell of a Gravios is so resistant to fire, it doesn't conduct heat very well either. So, the mass and size it acquired as a Basarios now allow the Gravios to stay submerged in lava for longer, as its bulk essentially serves as a time limit to how long it takes the surrounding heat to reach and damage the wyvern's organs. It is in fact theorized that the main reason this species of wyvern grew so large was to maximize their efficacy at staying submerged in lava. The second key adaptation of the Gravios is its bacterial colony. Through years of cooperation, the bond between the wyvern and its colony has grown so intimate and so efficient that the bacteria can even extract nutrition from the rocks the beast swallows. This means that a Gravios can transition from being a partial insectivore to entirely subsisting on rocks and minerals, eliminating the need for hunting entirely. This turns the usually desolate wasteland of volcanic rock plains into a veritable buffet for the Gravios, who can eat just about anything it sees here. It's hard to overstate the immense ingenuity of this strategy. Through rigorous preparation and unique adaptation, the Gravios puts itself into a niche where it can traverse magmatic depths unreachable by basically any competitor, can withstand any attack with its thick shell, and can nourish itself from the abundant volcanic rock in its habitat with no need for tiresome predation. The single downside of this is that since its body is built to not allow heat to travel through it, that also counts for the heat produced by its bacterial colony during digestion. In fact, the digestion of volcanic rock is so heat intensive that their stomach is regularly beset by explosions. Heat like this has to be vented immediately. Another possible danger for the Gravios long term is simple heat exhaustion. Continuously teetering on the verge of being burned alive while also expelling and circulating heat is sure to take a toll. The Gravios prevents this by taking regular trips to colder areas, such as nearby swamps, in order to cool off and recover before returning to its magmatic home. One thing the Gravios doesn't have to worry about, however, are predators. Its size alone makes hunting a Gravios an ill-advised endeavor for most, but if that wasn't enough, the wyvern's defensive mechanisms are sure to deter the rest. As it must vent its heated gases more frequently, the Gravios is an expert at using them defensively, covering an area under and near it in fumes that can poison, knock out, or simply scorch any that come too close. The Gravios shrewdly chooses the right kind of gas for the right kind of opponent. But even this pales in comparison to the wyvern's most dangerous weapon. The junk rock that is left over from the digestion process, stored in a special magma sac, can be heated and molten by the Gravios at will. And while the Basarios insecurely flung the resulting flame rocks at scary opponents, the Gravios knows how to use them to their maximum effect. By melting them down into pure, liquid lava and pushing them through a thin nozzle in its throat, the Gravios can spew these molten rocks out as a beam of lava. This attack burns at temperatures magnitudes more intense than even the strongest wyvern fire, and will incinerate targets nearly instantly. Some Gravios will use this opportunity to also vent its gases while firing the beam, ensuring that their target will be burned alive at any distance. It is important to understand just how devastating this attack is. Due to these weapons and its shell, the Gravios is basically indestructible, and the guild has so far only found a single creature even capable of preying on them. Luckily for hunters, Gravios stick to volcanoes most of the year, and rarely become a problem that needs dealing with. In some cases, Gravios that are on their way to a swamp to cool down might come dangerously close to a settlement and become the target for a preventative hunting quest. These quests are however reserved for only the most experienced hunters, as facing a Gravios is an unenviably dangerous task. The Gravios family of wyverns' life is objectively a success story, where a flying wyvern adopts unorthodox strategies to eliminate the common pressures of survival one by one. The species quickly became a cornerstone of wyvern research, and fascinating observations immediately began popping up. In one most famous incident, numerous scholars began reporting observations of a Gravios with a completely black shell, as well as red highlights across its carapace. This newly found black Gravios played well into the enthusiasm of the guild at the time, and was hastily classified as a new subspecies of Gravios. Further research, however, refuted this classification. The black Gravios was soon discovered to actually be the already known Gravios species, Gravios petram, with a discolored shell. This was found to be the result of an increased body temperature and heat circulation, brought on by what one could call a too successful youth. Basarios are generally quite hesitant to use the magma sac and flame vents outside of absolute necessity, but some individuals seem to become abnormally proficient in its use. Basarios that come to master their flame abilities then seem to mature into these black Gravios, whose body is blackened by the excess heat. Black Gravios retain their flame affinity from their youth, having been observed to use their lava beam much more liberally than grey individuals. The force of the beam also seems to be increased, as the recoil can push back the heavy wyvern. Beyond that and an overall sturdier black armor, the black Gravios is mostly identical to the grey Gravios. Interestingly, the guild has so far not backtracked on their classification of the black Gravios as a subspecies, despite numerous scholars pointing out that it doesn't quite classify. It wouldn't be until much later that a second species of Gravios would finally be discovered. In the center of the main continent lies a mysterious place known as the Everwood. This forest remains one of the great mysteries of our world, a dense wood that has so far proven impossible to map due to its convoluted layout. Some hunters have even come back panicked, saying that the layout of the forest has changed every time they've gone into it. This is, however, generally unverifiable. It is, however, home to many secrets, many ruins, and as many unique monsters. It was here that a new species of Gravios was observed, or rather, its juvenile form. The ruby Basarios is an elusive creature and has only been seen a handful of times. Preemptively classified under the species name Gravios gemma, its main differentiating feature are the numerous gemstones and mineral crystals that seem fused into its shell. With the grey Gravios and its juveniles, crystals and minerals are digested and broken down into the shell invisibly, forming one homogeneous shape. But the Ruby Basarios seems to stick the crystals and minerals directly onto its body, through an as of yet unknown process. In fact, it remains unclear what the benefit of these crystals even is. The Ruby Basarios can fling them at threats as a defensive maneuver, but besides that, their purpose is not immediately obvious. One key observation is that these crystals look very similar to the ones that grow naturally in the Everwood, but that connection doesn't exactly tell us much. What is also still unknown is what this species actually looks like when it matures. While Ruby Basarios have been spotted a handful of times, they have never been observed transitioning into a Gravios. Scholars theorize that its adult form probably just looks exactly like the other Gravios species, but without direct evidence, one can't be sure. Understanding nature is both our duty and our pleasure. It is a mission with no end, a task of such magnitude that our children and our children's children will likely carry on the torch still. But sometimes, we get to glimpse into the mechanisms of our world, accompany creatures such as the Gravios across their fascinating lives, and reaffirm that which we already know in our hearts. That the world is inexplicably complex and ineffably beautiful. Not all environments are created equal. While we have a tendency to simply separate the world into a binary, civilized settlements versus the wild frontier, it is a false one. That other space, the wilderness, is far from homogeneous. The tender grasslands and their inhabitants may as well live on a different planet than the ruffians that prowl volcanic mountains, so different are their lives. Every biome is unique, and every ecosystem produces its own unique conditions and resulting survival strategies. One biome known to stand out is the desert. Infamously harsh, these arid wastelands produce some of the toughest warriors known to the guild. Only natural, when resources are scarce and competition is fierce. On the world as it has been mapped so far, there are two major deserts that have been discovered. The peninsular desert of Sekumea and the Wildspire Waste of the New World. A smaller desert area can also be found near Valhabar. While they may seem superficially similar, they all maintain their own unique ecosystems, with many species and behaviors being only found in each desert. But even in this variation, there is one constant. While the minutiae of the food chain may vary, the throne at the top is always filled by a certain family of flying wyverns, powerful monsters who stand at the zenith of desert life. The Bloss. Classified under the superfamily Cornucrania, Bloss are horn wyvern that live exclusively in deserts. They are reclusive and quite rare. A blessing for everyone, as the Bloss are both incredibly powerful and relentlessly aggressive. Despite this temperament, they are actually herbivorous and do not hunt for prey. Rather, they attack out of territorial instincts, tolerating no intruders in their domains, which can span huge areas. In fact, this need for large territories is probably the reason why Bloss are fairly rare. They generally cannot coexist near each other. There are two known genuses in the Bloss family. The first one is the Monobloss, a very elusive wyvern with some significant historical relevance to the guild. This brown-shelled beast is easily identifiable by its large ossified frill, its sharp beak, and its singular nasal horn. The monobloss's tail, as well as its frill, are covered in various spikes and horns that further add to its fierce appearance. They are considered quite rare, and thus very little is known about their lives. Some observations have however been made through the efforts of the scholars of the guild. Monobloss spend much of their time patrolling their territory by burrowing underground. Like all species of bloss, monobloss are flying wyvern in name only. Their bodies are much too heavy to fly for extended periods, and they have only rarely been sighted hovering for brief periods of time. So the wing claws are modified into sharp digging tools, which allow for swift movement under and through the sand. The massive horn also helps in pushing that sand to the side. A monobloss schedule is equally divided between safeguarding its territory and feeding on the bloss' favorite food source, desert cactus. Monobloss territories will often be selected purely based on the number and quality of cactus patches in the area, and the wyvern defends those patches ferociously. Should a monobloss encounter an intruder, be they wyvern or human, it will not hesitate to attack immediately. The bloss family does not produce any kind of breath attack or elemental substance like many other wyverns do. Instead, they fight using their size, strength, and command of the terrain. A monobloss will enter the fray with one goal: skewer its opponent with its massive horn. A monobloss horn is among the toughest materials found in nature, its crimson hues often hidden by a strata of hardened sand. The monobloss will swing and stab with its horn, knowing that a single hit from it will neutralize most targets. Of course, a tail swipe or two for good measure are also included. But the monobloss' most dangerous ability is its speed. Despite its massive body, it can both run and burrow at high speeds, able to charge and dive at targets horn first, increasing the deadliness of its already ferocious body. They are especially adept at attacking from below, using their excellent hearing to navigate through the sandy ground before lunging out from below their target. Another weapon that the monobloss shares with other genuses in the bloss family is its voice. The screams of a monobloss are ear-piercingly loud, and have on occasion caused actual physical damage and ruptures to creatures standing too close to it. As the battle intensifies, the heart of the monobloss, one of the most valuable monster materials in existence, accelerates, causing blood to flow more violently. Once this happens, the monobloss frill lights up with a red pattern, serving as a final warning to any intruders. Leave now or perish. This pattern seems to also influence mating behavior, interestingly. While much of the ecology of the monobloss is still uncertain, its history with the guild is well known throughout the lands. In the fog-woven days of the past, when monster hunting didn't exist yet as a true profession, a band of 5 heroes arose, traveling the old continent and slaying monsters that terrorized settlements. This party, led by a Wyverian wielding a sword and shield, is believed to have been the first adopters of monster hunting as a lifestyle. They brought hope and salvation wherever they went to the terrorized population that lived under the fear of monsters, and their travels eventually took them to the Shrade region. Here, on Mount Kokoto, they encountered a monobloss that had been striking fear into the hearts of nearby towns. Thus, they faced it, and while they were brave and strong, the mighty monobloss killed one of the 5, the fiancé of the squad leader. Defeated, the party ran away to lick their wounds, but the Wyverian leader, aggrieved from loss, ascended back up the mountain to face the wyvern alone. After a battle that some say took 40 days and nights, the monobloss was slain, and the Wyverian returned with the Crimson Horn triumphantly in hand. This Wyverian, from then on known as the Hero of Kokoto, laid the groundwork for many of the foundations of monster hunting. At the site of his battle, a village called Kokoto was formed, which has long since served as a hotbed for new and upcoming hunters. The loss of his love is honored in guild law by only allowing parties of maximum 4 hunters to embark together. The 5th member is surely fated to die, just like the hero's love. But most importantly, in honor of the hero's bravery, monobloss hunts are exclusively posted as solo missions, as hunters must slay the beast alone to prove themselves, a tradition known as the proof of a hero. However, this ritual is not as easy to fulfill considering just how rare monobloss are. They are solitary and only live in remote regions, so it is highly unlikely to ever encounter one. Even rarer than the commonly thought of brown monobloss is the white monobloss, which can be identified by its white shell. Next to nothing is known about this subspecies due to how rarely it's been sighted. Beyond its white coloration, no obvious differences between it and the brown species have been observed. Some researchers have suggested that the pale shell allows the blood patterns on the frill to be more visible, which could have implications for territorial and mating behavior. But until more sightings occur, little can be confirmed or said about the white monobloss. The other major genus of bloss is, by comparison, much more common. This horn wyvern has a wide habitat, even appearing in the New World, and sightings of it happen somewhat regularly. This is the diablos, the closest extant relative of the monobloss. It can be easily distinguished by a few prominent features. The diablos shell is more sand-colored, its frill is smaller and more rounded, its tail ends in a club rather than spikes, it has 2 protruding tusks, and, most importantly, instead of one long, thin nasal horn, the diablos grows 2 massive, thick, curved horns above its eyes. It's important to note that when the 2 bloss genuses were first discovered, they were wrongly called subspecies of each other due to their similarities. While many older guild texts still retain this wording, research has progressed since then, and it is no longer considered accurate. The monobloss and diablos are indeed closely related, but they are both part of their own bespoke genus, and not subspecies of each other. One can easily see how that mistake would happen though. In terms of lifestyle and behavior, the diablos is nearly identical to the monobloss. It, too, prowls territories centered around cactus patches. It also burrows underground using its superior hearing, and it also primarily uses its horns for defense and offense. However, because diablos are not nearly as rare and are seen much more often, their behaviors are much better understood. For example, the reclusive nature of bloss species was generally considered a consequence of their high-strung territorial aggression, but research into the diablos revealed a different explanation. Because of their excellent hearing, diablos are actually quite vulnerable to loud sounds. Even moderate volumes, such as shrieking birds and desert winds, might be somewhat painful to the sensitive ears of this giant wyvern. Thus, diablos spend much of their time in burrows and underground caves away from loud sounds, only surfacing to eat and defend their domain. Eating is a surprisingly passionate affair for the diablos. It has been noted to be highly selective of the cactus patches it centers its territory around. Once a suitable patch has been identified, the diablos will hyperfixate on that one cactus, protecting and nurturing it with intense jealousy. The diablos' tusks serve to both puncture the skin of the cactus as well as dig up and move the soil under it, allowing the wyvern to monitor the health of its patch. its favored cactus patch withering and dying is a highly traumatic event for the Diablos, and it has been observed that frustrated individuals will up and abandon its entire territory altogether if that happens. While it may sound odd, it makes sense for the wyvern to have such an emotional bond to its plants. They are its lifeline, as a Diablos gets both all of its nutrition and hydration exclusively from cacti. A Diablos will go and visit its patch up to 6 separate times a day, both to feed and to work on it. Just like the Monoblos, the Diablos does not take kindly to intruders. Should it sense an unwanted guest with its hearing, it will immediately go to investigate and potentially attack. Its horns may be shorter than those of its cousin, but a rampaging Diablos is still more than capable of destroying its enemies with them. Between the thick horns and the heavy tail club, a Diablos can easily kill most creatures merely by swinging around either parts of its body. And of course, it too can burrow into the ground and then lunge out for additional deadly impact. One interesting observation is that Diablos found in the New World seem to be more aggressive than those on the Old World continent. Not even the Diablos' own kind is spared from their territorial aggression. While Diablos' territories may sometimes overlap slightly, it is extremely rare to see two individuals near each other. Should two Diablos meet, they will almost certainly engage in a territorial dispute, locking horns to see who will be able to topple the other. The winner gets to expand its territory. This behavior happens equally between males and females, and only changes slightly during the mating season. When ready for a mate, female Diablos will begin to darken, their shell gradually changing color as her heat intensifies. This is the only time Diablos will actively seek each other out. This truce, however, only lasts until the mating is complete. Once the female Diablos is sufficiently fertilized, she will violently chase off her mate, returning to solitude to carry out her pregnancy. Soon after mating, the female Diablos shell will darken even further, turning her into a black Diablos. These pregnant wyvern were originally believed to be a subspecies of Diablos, but they are just female Diablos whose shell is temporarily discolored due to reproductive hormones. At the time of its discovery, variance as a concept had not been suggested, but most scholars now agree that the black Diablos should probably be reclassified as a variant, as she fits that definition much better. This amendment is still under review, however. Black Diablos are even more aggressive than regular individuals, as they now have to defend themselves as well as their unborn young. To do that, its hormonal flush tightens its muscles and temporarily increases the Diablos' strength many-fold. Black Diablos are much more agile and accurate with their charges, allowing them to dispatch enemies quickly. More deviously, the heightened muscular control the female gains during this period allows for unusually precise fluctuations in movement speed, allowing the Black Diablos to alternate its timing and speed to confuse opponents. A Black Diablos is thus a truly formidable opponent, and it's even been observed fighting off the likes of Deviljho. Its eponymous dark hide's purpose in this was long considered mysterious. Many researchers simply assumed it served as a threat display to minimize the risk to the fetus. And while that is probably still true, another function of the black shell has been discovered. Being dark, it absorbs more light, thus increasing the body temperature of the Diablos. This seems to facilitate the chemical and hormonal processes that go into its pregnancy. So, the black shell seems to serve as an additional heat intake for the female. This state is only temporary. Once the female gives birth and ensures her young's basic needs are met, she will return to her yellow sand-like color and abandon her young, which will then have to fend for itself. Due to their intense lifestyle, Diablos are seen as a sort of symbol of the violence inherent to the natural world. They are the desert storm that rampages without end. This symbolic status was further bolstered by a particular incident involving a particular type of Diablos. It is said that long ago, an unnamed desert kingdom was suddenly besieged by an unknown enemy. Villages within the kingdom's borders began to simply vanish, its people massacred and its walls shattered to dust. Battalion after battalion, army after army was sent after this enemy, and all were torn apart, squashed like bugs. A single account of their battle remains, describing a fight with a demon, a wyvern with many horns whose every pore shot out billowing hot steam. While the kingdom fell shortly after, and the story became part of guild mythology, the unnamed enemy has since been theorized to have been a deviant Diablos, now named Bloodbath Diablos. All deviants are immensely dangerous. Defined as extremely rare, abnormal individuals of otherwise well-known monster species, deviants stand out due to their sheer destructive power. The rare sightings of one generally lead to evacuation and widespread guild mobilization, and only extremely high-ranking master hunters are ever granted permission to face one in combat. But even among this most dangerous of classifications, the Bloodbath Diablos stands on the apex, considered the most powerful and cataclysmic deviant of them all. As much as a rumor of a Bloodbath Diablos being seen is enough to send the entire guild into high alert, a single Bloodbath Diablos could spell disaster. That is because of the specific way a Bloodbath Diablos is created. Every known deviant forms under unique conditions to that species, and the chances of one appearing are considered to be around 1 in a million. In the Bloodbath Diablos case, it develops when a young Diablos suffers the worst trauma its kind knows, losing a horn. The Diablos' horns are its most important body part, and losing one of them would be devastating for an adult. But for a juvenile, it is an even more stressful event. Moreover, young Diablos are often too small to lock horns with adults, so the only way for a juvenile to lose a horn is to have it broken off by a hunter. Should a hunter do this, and then fail to slay the juvenile, they will regret it dearly. The juvenile will usually die soon after, as it can't compete with the others with only one horn. But sometimes, these broken Diablos survive, push themselves past their limits, propelled by one emotion: vengeful rage towards the humans that humiliated it. These survivors grow up to be many times more violent than their peers, a mix of their rage and their need to compensate for their missing horn. Decades of violence and battle cause its body to morph. The horn regrows incorrectly as a mangle of spikes and curls, its tail club becomes asymmetrical, and many of its armor shells enlarge. More notably, the constant fighting and killing douses parts of its body in a constant coat of blood and viscera, which dry and mix with the beast's shell into a deep blue coloration. In never-ending violence, motivated by an intense hatred for humans, the Bloodbath Diablos is born. Because of this trauma, the Bloodbath Diablos is one of very few monsters that actively seeks out humans in order to kill them. That is why the guild takes supposed sightings of it so seriously. A Bloodbath Diablos is a nearly unstoppable force, its twisted horn and clubbed tail many times more destructive than those of a regular individual. The many battles it has won have given it ample combat experience, manifesting in cruel and cunning maneuvers, such as using a quick roar to stun a target before immediately charging at them full force. As the Bloodbath Diablos rage grows, its body changes. Its mutated heart, empowered by many wrathful beats, accelerates faster and faster, pumping blood with such vigor that the beast's veins become visible through its shell. The Diablos go stronger and angrier in this state, using unusual attacks to decimate its foes. If there are any enemies left past this point, the Bloodbath Diablos will enrage even further. As its heartbeat races ever faster, the wyvern's body heats up, until both its sweat and the fluids mixed into its shell begin evaporating into clouds of undulating steam. This is a Diablos at its zenith, as now its deadly moves are accompanied by scorching steam explosions. In this state, the Bloodbath Diablos is a true disaster walker, and only 2 hunters are known to have survived this onslaught. And even they did not actually win the fight, merely repelling the monster. Few can rival the ferocity of the horned desert warriors. Their bodies are monuments, totems to the power and violence found in the natural world. But in their wild hearts, they also hold the mundane, the amicable, the emotional. Violent they may be, within them still dwells the multiplicity of any life, and the reminder that even in danger, there is beauty and fascination. In the natural world, balance reigns supreme. While catastrophes and crises occur regularly, nature is generally quite good at keeping the balance of things. The ebb and flow of life goes on, and humanity is a part of it. Namely, the Hunters Guild's explicit mission statement is to maintain harmony between the civilized and the natural world. In most cases, this means protecting everyday citizens from the dangers of the frontier, the wild lands that cover the known world. But the guild also conducts behavioral research, tracks monster populations, protects fossil sites, and harshly prosecutes poaching, protecting the natural world in the process. In times of disaster and death, the guild is humanity's main defense against creatures most foul, a mantle that monster hunters carry with pride. All in all, it is a harmonious, effective arrangement. But then there are creatures that strain that arrangement, not by overwhelming the guild's strength, but by exhausting its patience. This is generally the case with highly intelligent monsters, and one such problem species ironically lives in the marshlands near Dundorma, one of the guild's command centers. Here, in the humid swamps, waltzes a creature renowned not for its destructive power, but its sheer, uncontrollable obnoxiousness. This is the Gypseros, a large bird wyvern that generally inhabits wet habitats such as swamps and jungles. It is easily identifiable by its large beak with protruding teeth, its cone-shaped head crest, its grey body, and its elastic pink tail. It is, at first glance, somewhat unimpressive. So how come a creature so inconspicuous is considered a nightmare for the guild? To understand that, one must observe the Gypseros' life and behavior. Like most bird wyvern, Gypseros are generally timid but curious, willing to investigate oddities, and equally ready to flee if those oddities turn out to be dangerous. What sets the Gypseros apart are 2 key behaviors. For one, Gypseros are highly attracted to shiny objects, as they are crucial to selecting sexual partners. It is believed that Gypceros select a mate based on the shiniest display. This, combined with the beast's extremely dexterous beak, leads to the Gypceros often descending upon wanderers and trading caravans to steal any and everything that glitters. This has led to numerous trade routes becoming nearly unusable due to the risk of encountering an incensed Gypceros. The second behavior that makes the Gypceros such a thorn in the guild's eye is its main defense mechanism. As they aren't very physically imposing, Gypceros defend themselves using a poison sac, which produces a venomous substance that can be mixed into the wyvern's saliva and spat at opponents as mucus. Now, Gypceros venom is quite weak, causing only mild discomfort in humans at low levels of exposure. To compensate for that, the Gypceros poison sac produces absurd amounts of this venom, allowing the wyvern to spew out such large quantities of it that even its mild effects are multiplied into genuinely threatening levels. What's arguably more problematic is that because it produces so much venom, the Gypceros uses it extremely liberally, spitting out a few globules of it whenever it feels even slightly agitated. This can, for example, lead to Gypceros poisoning entire fields and farmlands by accident after getting spooked by some small critters. While Gypceros venom is weak against humans, it absolutely devastates any flora it comes into contact with, so a Gypceros appearing near any agricultural sites is considered disastrous. For these reasons, Gypceros sightings generally result in hunting quests being issued by the guild. But despite being a bird wyvern, a Gypceros is no easy prey, not even for experienced monster hunters. Unlike most wyvern, the Gypceros is not covered in scales, but rather a unique skin called rubbery hide, defined by its eponymous rubber-like qualities. This hide is assumed to have originally developed as a mechanism to resist electric shocks, as one of the Gypceros' main ecological rivals is the Kezu, a cave-dwelling wyvern that uses thunder attacks to paralyze prey. But beyond merely repelling electricity, this rubbery hide is also quite resistant to slashing and piercing attacks, giving the Gypceros ample defense. It is also water resistant, ensuring that the Gypceros can live in these humid areas without having to worry about moisture-related diseases and discomforts. Additionally, being rubbery, this hide is quite elastic, which empowers the Gypceros' most bizarre weapon. Specialized muscles and rows of rubber skin around the tail allow the wyvern to extend the tail like a rubbery whip, lashing opponents with it before retracting again. These adaptations alone would make the Gypceros somewhat difficult to best. But what elevates all of its strengths is the creature's most surprising attribute: its speed and stamina. Despite its size and shape, the Gypceros can unleash random bursts of speed that catch most opponents off guard. Moreover, it is capable of maintaining this speed for quite some time. Gypceros take an extremely long time to exhaust, and in a battle of attrition, Gypceros will almost always win. For a long time, this odd ability was considered quite mysterious, and its mechanisms were only discovered after intensive analysis of the Gypceros' physiology. Various glands within the wyvern's body, particularly in its abdomen, produce and circulate a fluid called dash extract. This is a type of natural performance enhancer. When mixed into the cardiovascular system, this extract improves all physical abilities, most notably movement speed and stamina. Gypceros strategically activate their dash glands to empower themselves, thus becoming as fast and durable as they are known to be. While this ability makes the Gypceros extremely difficult to deal with, the discovery of dash extract was a massive breakthrough for the Hunters Guild. Soon after, more and more monsters were discovered to produce this natural steroid, and before long, it was being actively harvested by hunters. Guild alchemists quickly realized that by diluting and processing it, they could make dash extract safe for human consumption. This new elixir, called dash juice, now allows humans, mostly monster hunters, to enjoy the benefits of improved stamina and physical endurance for a limited time. Thus, while the Gypceros' quick movements are quite annoying to engage with, it ultimately gave humanity another tool in their endeavor to stand their ground against monsters. A Gypceros is an enduring, resilient creature, but even it will eventually reach its limits. They are, after all, still bird wyvern, and lack the brute force and brutality of most true wyvern. But even when cornered, the Gypceros still has a few tricks up its sleeve. Its distinctive head crest is no mere decoration. Over the wyvern's life, minerals and ores that it regularly swallows as part of its diet make their way up into that crest, mixing into it as small rocky fragments. Most crucial are the light stones, rare gems that Gypceros seek out specifically. This crest is thus transformed into the Gypceros' secret weapon. It is attached to a specialized muscle that can wiggle the entire crest slightly forward, enough to make it collide with the upper end of the wyvern's large beak. When the Gypceros hits its crest like that, it acts much like a flint, creating sparks as the minerals in the crest are hit and shatter. This produces a powerful, blinding flash of light, burning the retinas of any creature looking at the Gypceros, and allowing the wyvern to either escape or attack the dazed opponent. Being so used to having a photonic eruption occur right above its head, the Gypceros' eyes have naturally adapted to be unaffected by light flashes. But what truly makes the Gypceros so troublesome is its considerable intelligence. Despite its awkward appearance and somewhat silly demeanor, the Gypceros is a cunning and calculating creature that will use any advantage it can grasp. One frightful example is that it can lunge at human enemies and steal their belongings, strategically prioritizing valuables and consumables. This can be highly problematic if, for example, the Gypceros robs a hunter of their elixirs. The photonic eruption is also a weapon the wyvern uses cunningly, flashing enemies at just the right time to create an opening. As it fights, the Gypceros makes sure to douse the entire area in as much venom as possible, hoping to slowly envenomate its opponent. Even if it deems the situation hopeless, the Gypceros has a way out. These wyvern are known to play dead when a fight doesn't go their way, hoping to catch their assailant off guard. Should anything approach a pretending Gypceros, it will bide its time before using its crest to blind the target. Gypceros are known to be exceptionally patient during this maneuver, sometimes even allowing hunters to begin carving materials from its body before lifting the curtain. Some Gypceros, however, never reveal themselves and simply continue to play dead until the threat has left. This has led to a small logistical nightmare for the guild. On more than one occasion, hunters have returned from seemingly successful Gypceros quests, only to be told that the individual they thought they had slayed had actually just fooled them, and that they needed to be hunted properly this time. The subsequent paperwork and complaints are remembered painfully to this day. All things considered, the Gypceros is an oddly powerful creature. Despite being a chunky, unusual-looking bird wyvern, it has developed numerous unique and elaborate defense mechanisms that combine into a true force to be reckoned with. This seems to have been the result of extreme evolutionary pressures that affected the Gypceros lineage. Fossil analysis has described an extremely short-lived cousin ancestor species of the Gypceros, the Bajirisu. It likely resembled the Gypceros, but was covered in hard scales instead of a rubbery hide. Its crest also likely could not flash, and no evidence of any poison organs has ever been found. In short, the Bajirisu lacked all of the adaptations that make the Gypceros so successful today. Its only unique feature was a clubbed tail that may have been fairly flexible. It is therefore not very surprising that the Bajirisu seems to have gone extinct rather quickly, while a related branch remained and eventually became the modern Gypceros. Considering that the Bajirisu was outcompeted by other bird wyvern, it is likely that this genus was exposed to extremely competitive environments, thus driving the Gypceros' unique and inventive defense mechanisms. Today, Gypceros are nearly uncontested in their marshy habitats. While they still have to fear true wyverns such as the rafts, their numerous abilities allow them to stand their ground and walk the swamps confidently. They do have some dedicated predators, but all in all, the Gypceros' life is a success story. As far as diversity goes, there are two described extant species of Gypceros. The grey Gypceros is the more common one, and considered the archetype of the genus. Meanwhile, the purple Gypceros is quite rare, only being sighted once every few years. It is easily distinguishable by its purple hide, adorned with green markings. This discoloration is believed to be a side effect of the purple Gypceros' main difference from its grey cousin, its enlarged poison sac. Purple Gypceros produce both more and stronger venom, able to flood the area around them in potent toxins that work much faster than the diluted mixture of the grey species. This allows it to be even more dangerous, and it likely would pose a serious problem for the guild if purple Gypceros weren't so rare. Many of us fall prey to thinking of nature too rigidly. What is and isn't powerful is often decided in the mind purely based on looks and impressions. It is a view that often underestimates creatures such as the Gypceros. Success and strength can come from any number of sources, and it is unwise to disrespect the never-ending ingenuity of those that walk the natural world. Science, in a way, is a blanket. As much as it is presented as a noble effort to measure the world and characterize the stars to understand our existence, it is also undeniably an endeavor of comfort. Like a blanket, we wrap ourselves in the findings of science and tell ourselves that come what may, our knowledge and ingenuity will keep us safe. That is, of course, a platitude. No matter how much we learn, what lies beyond the horizon of our understanding is always greater, always more elusive, always more magical. This is a lesson the Hunters Guild has had to learn again and again, and one creature in particular has stood as a continuous reminder of just how mysterious the world still is, despite our best efforts. This case is in fact so mysterious that it is not trivial to determine when it even started. Over the many years of the guild's existence, hunters would occasionally return with an odd report. Quest completed, target slain, everything went smoothly. But amidst it all, they reported to have felt as if they were being watched. A tingle in the air surrounding them at all times. Some of these reports even mentioned seeing a lean shadow leap away in the distance, always just out of reach. All of these encounters were also accompanied by a sudden thunderstorm appearing and then quickly disappearing again. The hunters never reported to have been in any danger during these initial sightings. It was always just a quiet brush with the unknown. As the Hunters Guild grew in size and the number of hunters out in the field at any given time increased, so too did these odd encounters grow in frequency. Before long, the shadowy Watcher had not only been sensed and glimpsed, but even seen from a reasonable distance. While the descriptions of the entity varied wildly, there were a few consistent features. It was indeed described as a monster, an animal rather than some supernatural entity. Most reports agreed that it was not a massive creature, and that it walked on 4 legs. Beyond this, however, the alleged appearance of the Phantom Beast varies significantly, being described to be of basically any color, with numerous contradictory features such as tentacles, whiskers, and frills. At the time, the guild considered this mystery to be of somewhat low priority. While it was certainly puzzling and tantalizing, it wasn't actually posing any threat to hunters or civilians. Whatever this creature was, it merely observed from afar and then vanished. The Hunters Guild is primarily concerned with safety, so no immediate action towards uncovering this phantom beast was taken at that time. However, as rumors and myths regarding this case became common knowledge among hunters, many younger upstarts began engaging in reckless behavior, hoping to be the ones to finally confront and discover this mystery monster. Many boasted about trying to chase down the creature, and it soon became a sort of challenge for newcomers, despite repeated scoldings from their guildmasters. Until, one day, of course, a hunter returned to Dundorma in a panicked frenzy. Behind him, on a cart, he was hauling a collection of blackened armor pieces, loosely held together by a charred human corpse. The hunter himself was also injured, missing numerous fingers, which looked as if they had been scorched clean off. Through the babbling of the survivor, a severe tragedy was illustrated. This duo of greenhorns had dedicated themselves to discovering the mystery monster, and, independently of guild researchers, concluded that most of its sightings seemed to occur in or near the marshes around Dundorma. They had indeed found it and, against all guild recommendations, approached it head-on. As they faced it, the creature had suddenly leapt past them, followed by a roaring thunderclap. The surviving hunter recalled little else after that. From one moment to the next, his fingers and his friend were gone, replaced with the stench of burning flesh. From this description, it appeared that this creature was a thunder element monster of hitherto unheard of potency. While all thunder monsters are dangerous, no living creature was ever seen outright vaporizing a human so easily. As a result, the discovery, classification, and containment of this phantom beast was made an urgent investigation. Luckily, the survivor had been able to get a good look at the creature, and, after a bit of calming down, his testimony proved invaluable in tracking it down. The entire Hunters Guild, focusing on one goal, is a tremendous force, and, indeed, the mystery creature would soon be discovered and observed by a sanctioned hunting party. It matched the survivor's description perfectly. It was a quadruped creature, roughly the size and shape of a moose. Its blue hide was striped and grew white, luminous patches of fur in various places. And on its head sat a single, deep blue horn, perfectly straight and horribly pointed. As its existence became confirmed, it was named Kirin. Even after its official discovery, the Kirin was, and continues to be, a deeply elusive creature. It matches no known monster group and seems to have no immediate relatives, thus placing it into the Elder Dragon category by necessity. But even this decision is much debated. As mystical and bizarre Elder Dragons may be, the majority of them do display some degree of similarity, which is completely absent in the small, equine Kirin. A small group of researchers are currently petitioning to investigate its relation to the Kelbi, another small equine creature, but that angle has gone nowhere as of now. Equally disputed is the Kirin's actual lifestyle and territory. Kirin are sighted in almost every environment with no clear regularity, and as such, the guild doesn't have a habitat map as much as it just has a list of locations in which Kirin have been sighted before. They do seem to appear more commonly in the Ancient Tower, a derelict megastructure deep in the ruined land of Fonron. They also seem to be slightly more common in the marshes near Dondorma, as the Greenhorns tragically surmised. Some researchers have suggested that Kirin do have a bespoke territory somewhere in the wild, but that it is so remote, so elusive and inaccessible that all the guild ever sees are the individuals that venture out and away from their secret home. Whatever the case may be, the little confirmed information about the Kirin paints a fascinating picture all by itself. Kirin are swift and graceful, galloping across any and all climate zones with seeming ease. While they are not actively aggressive, invoking their anger will see them attack relentlessly, using perhaps the single most inexplicable ability ever discovered by the guild. True fulminokinesis, the ability to command lightning. Monsters that utilize electricity or the thunder element to attack or defend themselves are actually nothing new. Even in the early days of the guild, various natural mechanisms to harness the thunder element were known and understood, specifically in the Kezu. But in most of those cases, the monster in question possesses some internal organ or feature that produces, stores, or guides electricity. That is not the case with the Kirin. It does not appear to have any internal structures associated with this, nor does the thunder it controls even originate from its own body. Instead, the Kirin is able to generate storm clouds in the atmosphere above it and call down natural lightning strikes at any time on any target it desires. The Kirin doesn't merely use thunder attacks. It forces the very heavens above it to obey its commands and send down scorching thunderbolts. Natural lightning strikes are magnitudes more powerful than anything a living creature could ever hope to produce in its own body, and so this ability makes the Kirin both unique and devastatingly powerful. Lightning dances around this beast, striking at any that approach it. The speed and intricate patterns with which these strikes occur are nearly impossible to outmaneuver, and few beings, man or monster, are able to survive getting hit more than once. The Kirin found in the New World can even cause lightning to curve and fly horizontally, an entirely unique and absurd occurrence. True fulminokinesis is as mysterious as it is powerful. Lightning strikes are a largely random phenomenon, and there aren't many known mechanisms to feasibly manipulate them, let alone control them to the degree seen in the Kirin. Careful observation has however yielded some clues. This ability seems to depend on both the Kirin's white fur and its horn. Whenever it calls down thunder, its mane glows and pulsates brightly, and the larger lightning strikes are called down by a swing of the azure horn, which can often be seen crackling with small arcs of lightning around it. Two key observations further solidified the importance of these two body parts. First, in the New World, a researcher made a breakthrough discovery when they finally managed to observe a kirin during feeding. Long thought to be herbivores, kirin were finally confirmed to seek out plants, but not for the usual reasons. While the researcher called it feeding, what they actually observed was that the kirin was licking the plants rather than eating them. It seemed to be lapping off the moisture that accumulated on the surface of certain flora, and, curiously, whenever it did so, the kirin would shed small puffs of its white mane, which would briefly glow like it does while calling down lightning. This suggested that there was some mechanism by which absorbing moisture could replenish or otherwise influence the kirin's mane. The sparkling energy that surrounds the hair at most times might suggest that the beast does store some degree of thunder in its own body as well. How exactly this interacts with its ability is still unknown. The second key observation centered around an entirely different species. The Rajang, a rare and dangerous fanged beast, is well known for its thunder abilities, which color its coat and empower its fists. But these abilities are not innate at birth. Instead, Rajang must perform a sort of coming-of-age ritual, in which they hunt down a kirin, break off its horn, and consume it. Upon ingesting the horn, a Rajang unlocks its full electric potential. This implies that the horn is indeed where the major thunder abilities of the kirin are localized, as it would otherwise not have this effect on the Rajang. Both parts of the mane and the horn were later retrieved for study, which was unfortunately less insightful than expected. While both materials held significant electric charge, making them difficult to handle, they showed no signs of special structures or adaptations that enabled that property. It was as if the kirin simply had a natural, mystical relationship to the storms, and that they granted it power beyond the constraints of mere biology. Using this power, a rampaging kirin is a force to be reckoned with. As if the lightning strikes weren't enough, the beast is also quite formidable without them. Its strong legs allow it to shoot itself off the ground at tremendous speeds, even being able to leap up cliffs and mountains effortlessly. In conjunction with this agility, its horn is not just a vessel for its thunder ability, but a deadly skewer, ready to penetrate those that irritate its wielder. Defensively, the kirin has another bizarre ability. By calling down a lightning strike onto itself, it envelops its body in a plasmatic aura. The crackling electricity surrounding it tempers the kirin's muscles, making its body so hard that almost nothing can harm it. It is a truly otherworldly creature. Kirin research did not just happen in a vacuum. With each new, inexplicable detail about the creature that made it into guild records, the imagination and ambition of scholars all across the organizations was emboldened. The kirin may be elusive, but through that quality, it inspired an entire generation of researchers to dream and imagine all the other unusual, magical beasts that might roam the great unknown. And of course, numerous theories around the kirin specifically emerged. One favorite in scholarly dining halls was the question of if the kirin's relationship to the storms was innate and unalterable. Was the kirin inextricably bound to lightning through some specific, unknown ancient pact? Or could there be a kind of kirin that controls a different element? The answer to this question revealed itself sometime later, during the Magala incident. In this historic event, a rogue Gormagala caused chaos and panic in and around the Valhabar region, leading to increased guild activity in the area. This jurisdiction included a nearby zone called the Everwood, a massive forest full of ancient ruins. It is in fact so massive that it has, to this day, never been fully mapped. Many rare and even unique creatures live in these woods, and one day, a patrol came back with a truly astonishing report. The party described spotting a Kirin. This was by itself nothing new. Kirin had been seen in the Everwood before. But this individual was different. Its hide was much darker than usual, nearly black, and its mane was of a deep purple color. The horn was a dull pink rather than the characteristic azure. But most bafflingly, this Kirin did not call down lightning. Instead, its horn seemed to control the ambient temperature, able to flash freeze anything within its sight in an instant. It could produce icicles and ice spires to both defend and attack. This was quickly classified as a subspecies of Kirin, named Oroshi Kirin, and it would only be sighted a handful of times after this initial discovery. Nearly nothing is known about it and how it lives, and all descriptions of it merely repeat that first sighting. But the fact that the Oroshi Kirin controls ice was nonetheless significant. Researchers have suggested that since both ice and storms are abilities that interact with moisture and humidity, the Kirin's true ability may actually be to control atmospheric humidity around it. Alas, until more sightings occur, nothing can be truly confirmed. The world is so vast and so infuriatingly beautiful. Even with all our science and research, nature continues to find ways to humble us. No academic paper could describe the magnificence of beings such as the Kirin, a magnificence that exists within the unknown. And in that unknown, we must venture. Because who knows what wonders still lie beyond our horizons. Our history with nature is a fascinating one. It's easy to think that humanity's spot in the ecosystem is relatively stable, but it, like everything else, changes rapidly. This is why it is valuable to consider the present in context of the past. The relationship between mankind and monsters is currently at its most favorable. While the world still holds many mysteries, many wonders, and many dangers, the Hunters Guild has become so organized and powerful that it can handle most situations that crop up. The wilderness is far from tamed, but the guild has developed strategies and weapons capable of holding it at bay. Hunting tools, dragonators, mobile cannons, our arsenal is vast. Simultaneously, science has progressed to a degree at which we can predict the movements, behaviors, and even population growths of a wide variety of extant monsters. Our knowledge has made us strong, which is why it can be so difficult to imagine a world before all this. A world in which there was no weapon capable of destroying a wyvern shell, where the migrations of monsters were as mysterious as the ocean's storms, and where an encounter with any wild creature could and often did mean death. It was a dark time when humanity huddled together in their settlements and when the frontier was entirely ruled by monsters. It is a time easily forgotten. And yet, there is one creature whose very existence stands as an eternal reminder not just of that time, but of how easily we might be catapulted back into it. The list of terrors that haunted us in the past is long and dubiously accurate. Tales of black dragons, of plague wyverns, of eternal serpents fill the pages of historical folklore. But we do not have to look to legends to find terrible and great monsters of the past. In those fog-woven days, even a Rathian was a serious problem, and ordinary people had basically no way of defending themselves against it. If a monster wandered into a village, all anyone could do was hide. It was this pressure that eventually led to warriors taking up swords and becoming hunters, after being inspired by a certain incident. But before all that, monsters reigned supreme. And there was one kind of monster that was considered truly unstoppable. A creature whose appearance heralded inalterable doom. And all without even a shred of malice. Tales tell that sometimes, seemingly at random, villages all over would be shook by rumbling footsteps. The lucky ones would hear them as a distant droning. The unlucky ones would hear them getting louder, closer. Before long, one unfortunate settlement or another would see it. The Old Mountain Dragon, an enormous monster who is said to simply walk over villages, trampling its citizens to death. An uncaring, unstoppable mass of indifferent destruction. These days, the existence of this ancient titan is not only confirmed, but also classified within the guild's ecological records. It is called Lao Shan Lung, and was, due to no obvious evolutionary connections known at the time, put into its own, at the time new classification, Elder Dragon. While one more direct relative of it would be discovered much later, back in those days, the Lao Shan Lung stood out enough to justify the creation of an entirely new classification, one that has since gone on to house many of nature's most mysterious creations. And among them, the Lao Shan Lung stands tall, literally. An enormous dragon that can reach lengths of up to 70 meters, this creature is one of the largest ever discovered. While it usually wanders around on all fours, it can assume a bipedal stance for a limited time, truly showing off its enormity. This massive body is covered in a large, immensely thick, spiked shell, usually orange in color. Its head is adorned with numerous horns, the longest of which sits on the dragon's nose. With onlookers often taken aback by the creature's sheer size, it is easy to miss all the other unusual features of the Lao. For one, it entirely lacks wings. This puts its shape at odds with most known wyvern at the time, and even today, it is one of the few elder dragons to not have wings or additional wing-like limbs. It also seems to have no elemental abilities whatsoever. It has never been observed producing any kind of breath attack, and examinations of its body have yielded no discovery of elemental organs. It in fact seems to have no special adaptations, save for one: its shell. At first glance, it looks like most wyvern shells, thick and spiky, offering up protection to the beast. But closer inspection of the shell reveals that it is actually made up of numerous layers and thin strata, all sitting on top of each other, similar to a geological formation. That is because the Lau's shell isn't actually present when the creature is born, and instead grows over time. The shell is the result of airborne particles, metal dust, volcanic ash, etc., sticking to the Lao Shanlong's body, being molten down by the dragon's high body temperature, and then cooling off into a mixed, tempered layer of hard coating. Over time, the Lao develops countless such strata, forming a thick shell that is many times stronger than most wyvern shells. In theory, were one to cut open such a shell vertically, one might be able to tell exactly where the Lao Shanlong has been in the past, as each type of fused material has a slightly different color when tempered. It is theorized that this shell is why the dragon doesn't have wings or breath attacks. It wouldn't need to evolve them if it already has an impenetrable and infinitely regenerating defensive mechanism. Growing a shell this way takes a long time. Time that the Lao Shanlong has. Based on analysis of shell fragments, as well as eyewitness reports and old records, the guild estimates that the Lao Shanlong's average lifespan is well over 1,000 years. Over this absurd period of time, the shell manages to grow into an impenetrable defense. What the Lao Shanlong does in those 1,000 years besides growing its shell is largely unknown. That is because Laos are only ever seen during one particular part of their lives, when they migrate. For reasons that are still unknown, every Lao Shanlong sighting occurs exclusively when the dragon is on the move, migrating along ancient routes again and again. Where it goes and why is still a mystery, as is its life outside of migration. A common theory suggests that Laos spend much of their time hibernating underground for decades at a time, and emerge periodically to go on their mysterious journeys. This was seemingly confirmed when, in one incident, a mining operation was decimated by a Lao Shanlong emerging from one of the mine shafts. However, more research is still necessary to confirm it. Its migratory behavior is of more immediate concern anyway. A Lao Shanlong on the move presents a massive threat due to its extreme tenacity. Forests, mountains, villages, no matter what stands in its way, the mountain dragon can and will trample it all to dust. Nothing can reliably stop its advance, and, if left unopposed, a Lao Shanlong will carve a flattened trail of destruction across the land merely by walking. It does so through sheer power, breaking through all manner of landscape in order to advance. For more stubborn obstacles, the dragon may use its massive nose horn to bore into it, breaking it apart with ease. It does not hurry, it does not exert itself. The Lao Shanlong simply moves forward, and buries entire civilizations in its wake. All of recorded history is full of lamentations regarding this cruel fate. In the past, seeing the silhouette of a Lao on the horizon was as if a death sentence had been cast on one's entire village. There was no hope, no resistance, only evacuation or destruction. It wasn't until quite recently that fighting a Lao Shanlong was considered an impossibility. But then, one day, a brave hunter in the east not only faced such a dragon alone, but also killed it, its plummeting corpse collapsing the earth beneath it into a valley. It is impossible to imagine what seeing that must have felt like. to live out generations upon generations in fear of the inevitability of the mountain dragon, to know it as a certainty akin to death itself, and to then watch it sink to the ground lifelessly, slain by a mere mortal. It must have been nothing short of electrifying. This is one of two incidents that is largely credited with creating monster hunting as a concept, and in this case, the site of the battle was so revered that a village was founded there not long after. However, repeating this legendary feat is not easy by any means, even today. In order to even attempt any kind of combat, a Laoshan Long has to be stopped or at least slowed. To do this, various kingdoms and nations have built fortresses in the known paths of these dragons over the last few years. These fortresses are the only places where the dragon's advance can be halted. Through the use of cannons, dragonators, and impeccable teamwork, these fortifications have also enabled the slaying of a handful of Laos in recorded guild history. More often than not, however, they have merely slowed or repelled the creature. The more impactful ways in which the guild has reduced the severity of Laoshan Long emergencies is through research. By reviewing records, witness reports, and ecological data, guild scholars have been able to triangulate likely Laoshan Long routes across much of the old world. Using this knowledge, various preventive measures were enacted, such as relocating smaller settlements, building additional fortifications, and informing the public about safe and unsafe settlement areas. This is as far as current knowledge about the dragon takes us, unfortunately. Because they are only ever seen on the move, much of their ecology remains a mystery. On a few scant occasions, a Laoshan Long with a discolored shell has been sighted. Instead of the classic orange, these individuals sport a dark grey armor. Immediately classified as a subspecies and named Ashen Laoshan Long, the discoloration of these dragons seems to stem from their shell being mostly composed of volcanic dust rather than a variety of molten aerosols. Whether this is the result of a genetically distinct speciation, or if there are just regular Laos that happen to mostly travel through volcanic regions, is still unknown. And at the pace that Lao research progresses, it is unlikely that we will know more about this in the foreseeable future. Our relationship to nature is ever shifting. One moment, we may feel meek and cornered, unable to face the creatures that roam the lands. The next moment, we may stand tall, empowered by knowledge and community. It is a constant push and pull, from our research into birdwyvern to our impotence against elder dragons. But this is not misery. It is our part to play in the grand theatre of life, and one we must play with grace. Through discovery and ignorance, light and darkness, life and death, through the shades of our existence, we must never lose sight of the magnificence of the natural world and our duty to observe and preserve it. It is the only way to truly live in this world of monsters and monster hunters. Thank you all so much for watching. I can't believe I actually managed to finish this series. It looked a little dicey at places, but I'm very grateful that everyone seemed to have enjoyed it and watched it and supported it. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in an upcoming season 2 perhaps. A very special thank you to all of my patrons. Remember, you can sign up to this and get to see videos a few days earlier. A very special thank you to Kuroneko, Zion H.V. Augensen, Robs D. Hyrule, A.J. Rivera, Alistair, Jacob Bennett, Soruka, Gengreatist, Sir Newt, Orbital, Terrador, Emperor Eevee, Rambling Robin, Lizric, Hashi, Black Ace 202, Dissy, Hobblemirror 123, Magenta, Danilo Villavicencio, Arcturian 711, Russell, Person 212, Claire Miboon, Oakwood Tree, Mr. Pyramid, Pere Fuego, Makot 02, Project Iceman, Peroskoko, Geo, Jamie Tate, Nils Schlatter, Fiction Ape, Iron Camel, and nah, I'm going to bed. Take care, everyone, and have a nice end of the year. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.